Good evening, everyone. This is the regular session of USD 453, Leavenworth, Kansas. Roll call now. Mrs. Murphy,
Here.
Mrs. Wells,
Here.
Mrs. Price,
Here.
Mrs. Overby,
Here.
Mrs. Reed,
Here.
and Mrs.
Wilson.
Wilson, yeah.
Here.
Let's see, we'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the district mission statement.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I know you get tired of this reminder, but just one more time, speak clearly into the microphone for our folks watching on YouTube to hear it. The mission of the Leavenworth Public Schools is to prepare every student for success in every classroom every day.
Okay, next item is the scheduled patron input. Two? Okay. Are they here? Okay, we'll get ready in just a second. I have to read this. We're pleased that you have joined us tonight to celebrate staff achievement, hear informational presentations and reports, and observe consideration of policy decisions and administrative recommendations specific to the Leavenworth Unified School District. We set aside time at each regularly scheduled board meeting to hear from the public. Comments should address board policies or the procedures our administrators established to carry out those policies, as opposed to individual complaints to investigate and resolve. Please understand that while board members will listen to and carefully consider your comments, board members will not immediately respond to questions either verbally or through gestures. For example, raising hands in response to questions. Nor will they engage in dialogue of answer and response during the patron input at this time, during this evening. This is not appropriate time or place for patrons to make comments of a personal nature about any district employee or student by name. Person making comments which violate the privacy rights of district employees or students will be asked to terminate the remarks. If speakers have concerns specific to an individual student or staff member, please make an appointment with the superintendent. These concerns will be documented and shared with the board. Each patron is reminded you have 3 minutes to speak and will give notice when 15 seconds remain. If a group is in attendance with the same interest, we ask that a spokesperson be appointed to deliver the group's message. As the unified board committed to desired outcomes for our school community, we ask that comments not be directed at individual board members, but addressed to the board as a whole. Thank you for taking time to address the district policy with the board. So who's up first, Jake? We got one on
I believe it's Colleen. Is that correct?
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Is the timer ready?
here.
When you
Is there a
start,
timer
when you
that-
start talking.
I can just start.
Yeah.
My name is Colleen Prang. I represent myself, my kids, and some of my friends who do not feel safe or free to speak on these topics. I want you to imagine you're a high school student. You're eager to talk to your friends. You get to school, you're excited. As you approach them, they start laughing at you and making fun of you. They make it clear that they don't want to have anything to do with you and you've done something desperately wrong. This happens with multiple people in multiple classes. You have no idea what's going on and you feel horrible. Suddenly, a small group of girls pulls you aside and gently explains that someone took a private picture you sent to your ex-boyfriend and spread it around the school. Your reputation is in shambles, but at least these girls have the decency to tell you and assure you that they have your back. School board members, superintendent, tonight the parents speaking, myself and Megan, speaking to you are like this small group of girls. We're offering you the benefit of the doubt and genuine concern for you and the school district. You may not realize it, but many of the parents in Leavenworth are very angry at you about the state of affairs in the district. Let me be clear, USD 453's reputation is badly damaged and your handling of the recent school threats broke what little trust parents had left in you. The district appeared to be caught off guard. While you applauded yourselves for coordinating with law enforcement, you came across, unfortunately, as secretive and condescending. It seemed like you failed to recognize the emotional toll the handling of this situation took on students, teachers, and parents. Students were terrified, parents were panicked, and teachers were left to manage chaos with little support or information. Some teachers did well, but others failed, some of them even chiding students and telling them they should not have contacted their parents. With all due respect, you have come across as entirely unaware of what everyday life is like in the schools and what families experience. I'm asking for 5 critical actions from the school board. 1, please come out of your offices and spend some real time in each school. Observe what is happening, listen to what's being said and what's being left unsaid. Please come and experience and understand the climate firsthand, but do it discreetly so people don't put on their best behavior while you're there. 2, please implement critical safety training. Use facilities active shooter training exercises and ensure that staff receive active shooter attack prevention and preparedness training. 3, partner with Leavenworth PD, Fort Leavenworth PD, and Leavenworth Sheriff's Department to conduct a live active shooter full-scale exercise without students present so all faculty, staff, and district authorities can truly learn how to protect the school communities best. Number 4, please require comprehensive conflict resolution training for all staff. There is a hostile culture in this district, especially in the high school. Students are disrespectful to each other, they disrespect teachers, teachers feel disrespected by both students and administration, some teachers disrespect students, and staff appear to be burned out. Loosening the dress code won't solve the culture, attendance, or performance in this district, but raising the standards will. We need a cultural shift that promotes respect and reduces fights and threats. School staff are utterly inept at handling conflict, and victims are often shamed and dismissed when they
15 seconds.
harassment or bullying. Please bring an objective third party to assess safety, culture, and performance. Many people in this community are unhappy with the district, but fear offending friends or family members, and they keep silent. Can I say my last sentence? I'm emailing each of you with detailed information that I have shared tonight with deeper explanations than my 3 minutes will allow. If you're open to further conversation, please reach out to me. I would be grateful to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you. You state your name.
I'm Megan Bird.
Okay, go ahead.
My alarm goes off on September 17th at 5:05 to get up to make sure my sophomore is up for drill. I looked at my cell phone. I had a plethora of text messages about the posting on social media, especially Snapchat. I was in shock and texted my friends who had shared the message with me. I asked my son before he left for drill, had he seen it? He said yes. He went on to drill like normal. I got ready and left for work, so my son called me and said no one from drill was staying at school that day, so could he come home? I continued talking to friends throughout the day about this. I never got a phone call from the school. No message, no robocall, nothing. Never got a phone call, nothing from the Leavenworth Police Department either. And I knew they all had been notified as well as the principal the night before. I was scared for my child's safety and also for the safety of the school. The guy did not turn himself in until 12 p.m. However, it said the school was safe, but that was before the Leavenworth Police Department and Fort Leavenworth Police Department knew where the guy was. Wednesday, my son went to drill at 5:30 and was said to stay at school since we had heard it was safe and the guy was in jail. Well, I got a phone call shortly before 10 a.m. from a panicked 15-year-old stating that they were going to pull the fire alarm during 4th hour and anyone in the parking lot was going to be shot. He said he didn't want to die that day. He was pleading with me to allow him to go home. I called him out and talked to the office to see what they knew. Again, no communication from the school. I decided to email the guidance counselor, who was truly amazing, and asked why I did not receive communication from the school. My oldest had graduated the year before, and I always got notifications. Well, the office said it was a glitch that had happened over the summer with Power School. It was never corrected. My husband and my numbers were both listed as emergency contacts for my child. So how many other parents were affected? You knew there was a glitch, but you never bothered to fix it. You were supposed to keep me informed and keep my child safe, yet you do not fix things that you know were an issue. Do better, Leavenworth. I know that if this was your child, you would be upset as I am, and you've got to do something to communicate with parents. And also, my other concern is you had a bigger issue with rainbows outside the library at an elementary school in the district than you do with high school student safety.
Thank you. Next item is adopting agenda. Have a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. I'll second.
Have a motion by Mrs. Murphy to adopt the agenda, seconded by Mrs. Overby. Is that right?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
7-0. Next item is the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as present.
A second.
I'll second.
Who did it? I didn't hear.
I made the
Oh.
motion. Mrs.
Ms.
Overby
Murphy made it.
seconded.
Mrs. Murphy made a motion to adopt the consent agenda, seconded by Mrs. Overby. All in favor?
Aye.
7-0. I think we're down to what we're really here for, right? Oh, staff recognition, correct? Mhm.
Hey, with all due respect to everybody else in the room, I'm going to say this is the best agenda item of the night. It's not too often we get to do something this cool. Mrs. Zanstein, you are very special to us, and you are the 2025 Kansas Teacher of the Year.
I love my job. I love teaching at Leavenworth High School. And I drive for 14 years, almost 2 hours round trip. We have awesome students. You let me have courage to do things I hadn't expected to do when I got here. And you've let me help students grow in ways I had no idea they could. So thank you. It's a great place to teach. It's a great place to be a student. And I love that I get to work there. Thank you.
Okay, item 5, legislative priority discussion. I want to thank the two gentlemen for showing up tonight. We used to do this pretty regularly, but it kind of dropped off the planet for a while, so I'm glad you showed up. Do you hear me now? All right, so I'll let Dr. Adams take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. First, gentlemen, thank you for your service to Kansas. Thank you for your service to your respective districts, and thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate your time. We have 6 topics that we thought we would kind of focus on. It's intended to be very much two-way dialogue with the 7 at the dais and the 2 of you. I am purely the facilitator. For the sake of time, we thought we'd cut topics off after about 10 minutes. Our goal here is no longer than an hour. So if that works for you, sounds good. All right. So the first topic we thought we'd discuss tonight was on with regard to teacher licensure and some of the barriers that we are seeing here. So just a little bit of context that I think is important. Again, our focus here tonight is what can be done at the statutory level or that's in the purview of the Kansas legislature. But some of those issues that we are experiencing, I would describe as barriers to employment and sometimes barriers to stay within employment. And so some of the concepts that are, I guess, important for us to discuss tonight is CAPERS 3. Specifically, I think it's very important for all of our new to the profession educators, as well as other topics that we can talk about that would retain and or help recruit new educators to the field, and specifically in the state of Kansas. So I would open it up for that, but that's kind of our first topic for conversation tonight.
Well, thank you, Dr. Adams, and thank you for the board for the invite. It's a privilege to come down here and obviously talk about these issues with you as we are getting close to this, obviously an election, and people are obviously interested in what you guys do and what we do and what we have done, as well as our vision for the future. I am Senator Jeff Pittman. I represent this district as well as Fort Leavenworth, Lansing's district, Baser, as well as Piper. Just for context. When I think about licensure, I'm going to let Representative Proctor probably talk about what we did with the opening up of licensure requirements for the state, because I know he's well spoken on that topic. I was very supportive of that. But I want to talk a little bit about retention. And we know we have a teacher shortage across Kansas right now. When we look at the numbers of slots that are open, and we know that this district has had challenges, whether it's with special education teachers, paras, or just the normal services. We go through that cycle every year right now, it seems, over the last few years, especially since the pandemic. I'm very supportive of, when you talk about CAPERS 3, I think incentives are a huge priority for our teachers. I think culture is a huge priority. And I think there are some barriers that we could remove. If we think about CAPERS 3, which is the retirement system here in the state of Kansas, we went from what was CAPERS 1, which is a very, very good plan and is well funded now. CAPERS 2, which was about half as good, call it the gold and silver standard. And we went down to what I call a lower bronze standard with Capers 3, which is all the teachers get now. And it was done to reduce the state's obligation in the future to almost zero when we get past all the Capers 1 and Capers 2 employees. There was a bill this year to put all of Capers 3 teachers into Capers 2, which would have been a very, very good incentive for those teachers out there. And I would like us to see us do something like that for all our Capers 3, but we have to look at the cost of that and see whether we can absorb that, what the liability is. But I think for the teachers, for our correction workers, I think that we need to do more. And in general, I think we need to, there's been a lot of, I guess, impetus to do that. But there's been reluctance in the old guard that put this Capers 3 plan in place, and a lot of them have moved on. So I think there's going to be an opportunity to do that. I'd also like to potentially reduce the waiting time for after retirement when teachers can come back in and start teaching. I think that is a barrier that we can easily get rid of. It was put in place to stop gaming the system, but I think we're at a point now where we don't see teachers really gaming the system and trying to retire and then also getting double pay. I think that's something that's an easy fix we can do. And I really think from a cultural standpoint, there's, we need to continue funding those things. We can talk a little bit more about what that means as we go into this discussion, but supporting, the special education needs, coming up with a better solution across our school here and across the state of Kansas, whether that's more funding specifically or maybe rethinking how our teachers deal with all our students that might have increasing special needs, or even those that don't officially have an IDE. How do we ensure that they are successful on their individual path? And I'll talk a little bit more on that in a little bit.
So board, Dr. Adams, I'd first say thank you for having us here. This is the first time I've done one of these. It's been a while since we've done a legislative discussion, and so I'm thrilled that we're doing this. For those folks who don't know me, my name is Pat Proctor. I serve the people of Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, and Kickapoo in the Kansas House, which means I've got all of USD 207 on post, and then portions of this school district in East and Pleasant Ridge. I'd like to thank Ms. Reed and Dr. Adams for taking me around Warren Middle School last week. That was a very, very interesting tour, but also a very interesting discussion with the staff there. On the topic of availability and retention of teachers, as Senator Pittman said, in my first term, I was the co-sponsor for a bill that allows folks to bring licensures from other states, especially military spouses and service members, here to Kansas and go right to work, which is huge here in Leavenworth because you've got this population of folks that are coming in every year. A lot of the spouses are teachers and they can come right in and they can teach, but that's a bit disruptive too. So it doesn't always work out, and sometimes the pace of military life, they're not always able to do it. So that's not the whole answer. I was very fascinated in the trip to Warren last week. I got to meet one of the teachers who is going through a master's program at Fort Hays State University, where they're getting a teaching certificate to go with their bachelor's that they already have in a field that they're teaching in. I think that's something that we in the legislature can help facilitate and maybe expand, because I think that it's great when we can bring folks from other walks of life into the classroom to give our kids a whole different look at, all the things that you can do once you graduate from high school and start to grow your life. So I think that's something that we should definitely look at how we can expand. I would briefly talk about Capers. I am a Capers beneficiary because even when I'm not in the legislature, I teach at Wichita State University. I'm a tenure track professor there, and I'm in the Capers program, and I'm in Capers 3 because I started late in 2019. And I'm in school, so I won't say what I really think of Capers 3. I'll just say it stinks. But we do need to do something to expand those retirement benefits so that we're giving folks that are serving the people of Kansas, whether it's here in the schools or in state government, the retirement that they deserve. I came into the legislature when Capers was not fully funded. And I'm proud to have been a small part of getting it to fully funded. Now that we have it fully funded, I think we're in a position where we can actually look out on the horizon and see what else we can do to expand those benefits. I've also been kind of on the losing end of several battles to try to do COLA for our teachers who have retired, because it's been 20 years since any of them saw an increase in the retirement benefits since they went into retirement. And, that's not about our teachers right now, but they're looking at those teachers. And if we don't do something to take care of the folks that have worked their whole life taking care of our kids and working in our schools, then we're not going to get more teachers. So I think that's a component of the problem too. With all that said, I'm here to listen today. So I really, really, really would like to hear what's on y'all's mind as ways that we can address this issue and all the other issues. Thank you.
As we look at the teacher's experience inside the classroom, we heard from some of your constituents, my constituents, about some of the challenges in the culture. Obviously, social media has an impact on our students. We all know that. And it's a brave new world out there that, especially after the pandemic, where we have a lot of uncertainty amongst the student population. And I feel as though we need to do more about structured mental health intervention. And maybe that includes the teachers sometimes. I mean, it seems like I understand that they have their insurance and everything, but when we look at the retention, sometimes things get so crazy in the schools. I hear about that. And sometimes it's a matter of the students lashing out in school. Maybe they're crying for help. Maybe they just had a bad experience. Maybe it's just the way it is that day. But sometimes there's some big issues that we need to continue to uncover. So there are ways that we can increase mental health funding. We did do a lot in the legislature over the last 5 years, to have an intervention type person that we took advantage of here in Leavenworth and in Lansing, the pilot program of the mental health intervention team. We really need to expand that across all of our districts and put metrics around that. One of the things that we're not happy with, I would say, from the legislature is what are the metrics that they're measuring on? We hear a lot of anecdotal evidence that it's phenomenal from the students as well as the intervention folks, but we definitely need to have more metrics that show that they're having impact when we have these intervention teams out there. And I think that's us trying to be a good steward of the money and having, but still having those impacts. So just wanted to add that in there.
Dr. Adams, that's 10 minutes for that topic.
So my timekeeper's keeping me honest here. We're at 10, but I don't want to cut off if there's questions or thoughts that percolated from any of you all. Any thoughts?
So my question for this specifically, because the topic was the teacher licensure, Amy, what barriers are you seeing when we're trying to hire our teachers that they need specifically that we are asking our representatives and senator to help us eliminate?
Well, that interstate compact is what Mr. Proctor was speaking about, which is going to help us tremendously.
Okay.
But there are some specific license issues with regards still, depending on the type of license that you have. For example, may I meet you? Dr. Rudelberger, if you want to explain, she is our director. This is Dr. Rudelberger. She's our director of special education. And she came from the Missouri side. And I'll let you explain how you can't teach when you're licensed to teach from Missouri to Kansas.
Yeah, so we have the great opportunity of being very close to Missouri and benefiting from any individuals that want to jump over into Kansas or they retire in Missouri. My example would be I can teach life skills, functional skills, low incidence on the Missouri side, but I cannot teach it here. And so we have teachers on the Missouri side that have 15 plus 20 years plus of experience teaching that population of students. They come over here to teach, but they can't teach that because their license doesn't fit for the Kansas requirements.
So she can be in charge of the entire program, but she, even though she holds the license, can't teach it in Kansas. Those are some of the barriers that we have talked about, and we have talked to the Kansas Department of Education, Teaching and Learning about.
What are the differences between, what's different between Kansas and Missouri that's holding us back?
It's the Department of Education's requirement. They're not
Praxis
accepting
testing.
a license.
What about it do
The
they not?
statute that is set by that, for example, licensure has changed in my tenure of 28 years and how they're issued and the requirements with that. Right now, we need to loosen up a little bit as far as the requirements and allow individuals that are coming from out of state. I do think the compact will assist us. We talked about that last month and working with other states that have similar demographics, military, for example, in other states. They can readily get a license in another state where they can't in Kansas. So with that new compact, that will assist us. But that just went into effect. So we haven't got to reap the rewards of that quite yet. We are going recruiting to those specific states, knowing that universities and colleges will be reciprocal to our state.
Is there a process where they're taking, where they would take an exam, like nurses? You have nurses that come from out of state with the military, and they'll get their license here, and they can practice within the hospitals and the clinics. But they do usually get their license unless there's some other special circumstance. Is there a exam that the state's requiring them to take to be able to accept their license?
Sometimes you have to actually have the education. It's just not having the test or passing the test. You actually have to have the education behind that before they'll allow you to take the practice. Once you have a license in Kansas, then you can add additional endorsements if you've met the requirements. Some will allow you just to take the test and some will not.
So
It varies.
are we as Kansas just having more requirements for?
Yes,
Okay.
yes on everything you're gonna say.
Okay. So to teach Algebra 1, somebody from Missouri has
They can
what
have-
you consider basic education through their bachelor's to teach this, but Kansas says, oh, but you didn't take.
I will use an example that I'm familiar with
Okay.
personally.
Okay.
Jim Sloan, who was my husband, you all know, who teaches in the social studies department. He had his bachelor's in social studies. He couldn't teach psychology. So he had to go back and get psychology endorsement, even though it's under the Department of Social Studies. That doesn't
Okay.
make sense.
And more specifically, you asked about taking a test. There are other content areas that you can do that, but special education is not one of those. So you cannot come in and take a test in
Okay.
special education.
Yeah, Amy, you make a great point. We sort of share the schools with the Kansas Board of Education. And so we, the framers of our Constitution very wisely separated powers on this. So we do budgeting, but in terms of a lot of specific policies, including this issue of what the specific qualifications are for any specific teaching assignment, they're really driven by the Board of Education. Those are elected officials, 10 folks from across the state that are represent us. So I think that they're probably a part of this discussion too. But yeah, it's a little more complicated than licensure for being an engineer or a doctor or whatever.
I mean, I imagine Representative will probably say the same thing, but I can commit to you that given the teacher shortage, I'm absolutely committed to looking, we help with this in terms of answering those types of questions. There's 50 states. We're one of them. We have certain requirements. Every state has different requirements. I think that we probably, as a state of Kansas, would want to have some minimum standards, but it sounds like we've got it really tight. And just like in the military, when we're short force, open up the requirements a little bit. And maybe if it's going too crazy, we tighten it up after 5 or 7 years. We can do that as a legislature. It's a lot of work to review everything, but it helps if we have folks who bring that to the table with some study of how we might find commonalities amongst professions. And I'm not as familiar with which groups might be doing that right now, but it would be helpful if we had some guidelines from folks in, say, the Department of Education or school boards, the association or any of the different folks out there to help guide us about where are we really getting too tight, where are we sacrificing, and then if we got too loose somewhere, where would that be? So having those kind of guidances are often very helpful for legislators, as we're not always experts in every single subject, and understanding of all the different ways that, maybe some states do it and some states don't. So any kind of guidance that you guys have access to, if you feed it to us, I'm certainly very supportive of getting more teachers in here that are qualified. So love to help you on that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to switch topics. I see that everybody's warmed up now. So as you can probably see, I'm skipping on the list, but I'm trying to keep these somewhat grouped. So I want to talk next about Medicaid funding and specifically to the positions in our school district. So we're going to kind of zoom in on that issue. We have some specialized positions that typically have acronym type of position titles that provide services to our students. The first example I'll give you is an RBT, a Registered Behavior Technician. So these are individuals, men and women, that are working with our students to provide services that right now we are not able to realize fully the revenue that could possibly be following with that. Want to talk through the nuance of that as well as challenges from your perspective, and then answer any questions. But we see it as an opportunity for us to help out on the funding side for these, what we believe are critical positions helping our kids.
So just to make clear, the question you're asking is the students that you're taking care of or not. Could you kind of elaborate on exactly what it is that you're trying to get at?
Sure. So we have certain positions in our district that if Medicaid funding were fully unlocked, we could realize additional revenue for those positions, thereby reducing the general fund expenditures for our district. So revenue
So
out
the
there that's
idea is that
unrealized.
The kids that are taken care of were Medicaid qualified and you were able to get.
Correct. That is accurate. Yep.
One more clarifying, with that type of the RBT as an example, when you say it's not fully funded, is that a rate thing or is it a Medicaid expansion type coverage type thing?
Sure. So this is nuanced. So I'm going to have our special education director explain it. But these are great questions. And this, I think, was the intent of tonight, helping everybody learn what's the true root of the issue, right? So thank you for your questions.
So currently we receive funding, as Dr. Adams referenced, for specific positions, one being physical therapist, occupational therapist. The ones that he's talking about now are not reimbursed by Medicaid at all. And so registered behavior technician, board certified behavior analyst, those individuals that work directly with our students that struggle with behavioral needs, those aren't reimbursed by Medicaid at all at this point in Kansas. In other states they are, but in Kansas that's not.
Is that because of our special waiver, the way we do Medicaid versus an expansion that a lot of people will talk about to a different population? This is specifically expanding the waiver to cover these types of folks.
Yes.
And is that something that the board would probably be advocating for?
Yes. Yes, first, yes. Yep.
Well, it certainly seems, as I mentioned on the mental health aspect, when we're looking at behavioral tech, would love to see, without having these discussions, this was off my radar, quite simply, without knowing that we might want to expand to the RBTs, knowing that the PTs were already covered. I'd love to see us expand that. When we do that, we're going to have federal dollars that will help match that, is the idea, to help with those kids that are having those behavior issues. Fully support that, but I say that there's always a caveat, need to know more about the details. So, I commit to investigating that, seeing what we can do, seeing if there's have we had other schools asking for this as well? Has there been a push?
I mean, painting this with a broad brush, keep that in mind, but
Yeah.
I would say several districts are experiencing the same issue where you have these positions, there's demand for the positions, but then there's not a revenue source that's helping with the addition of those positions.
Because they're not covered under that Medicaid waiver.
That is accurate.
Are there any grants covering this?
I'm not aware of any grants. Good question.
I'm new to this issue as well. I will take it back and research it and see if there's some solution that we can't come to that it makes eminent sense that if we're providing a service in the school, we should be reimbursed for it. So I'll take a look at it.
I'm going to chalk this up to success. We have an issue that several people are asking good questions about, and two gentlemen that are committed to investigating more. That's what tonight's all about. So thank you for that, guys. Let's shift gears now a little bit to one that's maybe a little more specific to USD 453. As you guys know, 286 school districts. We're all unique in several different ways. We are the state's fourth smallest school district geographically, so only 17 square miles. The rurality of Kansas, I think, has affected several of our policies, one of which is transportation state aid. So in very short and simple terms, transportation state aid is dollars that flow for transportation provided for students residing 2.5 miles or more from their school of residence. So flagpole to front porch, as I typically say. If you stay around later, I'll have a great presentation for you on this topic. So with that, the number of students in our district that do not qualify is very high. Suffice it to say, we see a need here. I think collectively we can agree that there is a need to provide more transportation services, but those come at a cost in which a revenue source is not flowing. So I wanted to talk tonight again about the nuance of that, as well as thoughts and or considerations for expanding that.
Well, when I first got into the legislature in as USD or as a House District 41, our funds were not there. We weren't constitutionally funded as a school district. This came up as one of the things in the funding formula. It wasn't necessarily decided upon by the Supreme Court when they registered their decision. We went on to fully fund schools with some caveats like this, like special education funding. It's not necessarily fully funded, and like this, where we used to have a 1 mile radius that we would fund everything outside of that 1 mile radius, and to help make up for the shortfall back in the early 2010s, we expanded it out to 2.5 miles, therefore reducing the obligation of the state to fund. I challenge any one of you, myself included, to walk to work every day, and I'm sure some of us can do it. 2.5 miles there and back, when it's below freezing, raining. You can see some of the kids struggling out there. And I would like to see us, I'll put it out there that some school districts take this on. And I'm not faulting you guys for not doing that. I know that introduces the need for a revenue source or taking away from other parts of your funding to fund this particular thing. But it is a tragedy to see kids that are struggling, especially the young ones, walking 2.5 miles through the city streets, often alone. So I'd like to see us reduce that circle as part of the funding formula. We have a very hard time in the legislature, I'd say, with our funding formula every year. There's a lot of pressure on a lot of different angles. The fact that we've been able to fully fund our schools for 5 years, one could call a miracle, but it's something where our process has worked for our kids and for our students and for you guys. At least at the end of each session, we're able to do that. So making this kind of modification it's been kind of tough. It's not necessarily a priority. Not necessarily a priority amongst especially the rural schools don't have as much density. They don't have as many kids that are affected by this. And the urban schools are the ones that get affected by this. And a lot of times the legislature thinks it's going to be too much. At a minimum, we should make sure that if any kid is in danger or in some kind of a high risk situation, that we take care of that kid and we allocate funds, even if that's an initial first step, no matter the radius. I'd really like to see us do this. I'd like to make this the priority. I'd like to see us have an education committee on both the Senate and the House side that can work together. It seems like the push is often to privatize funds is a major push of our committees. And I feel like if we just would drop that issue and focus on how do we make these funds that we have for public schools better, that's my personal viewpoint in terms of how our legislature is currently working. So I'd love to see us fix this.
So I'd just add to what Senator Pittman said. I live at the right off of 7th Street on Kickapoo. A kid in my neighborhood, if they were to walk to school, they got to walk all the way to David Brewer, and that's just not feasible. I wouldn't, I walk out there knocking doors and, I run out there exercising. I wouldn't let my 7 or 8 year old walk out the front door and walk all the way there and home. So it's definitely something that we got to take a look at. Another issue that we're going to have when we do expand busing is CDLs, commercial driver license. And we have the same issue with the city. The city pays for somebody to go get a CDL so they can drive the trash truck or whatever other vehicle, and they immediately go get another job where they can make 3 times more money with that CDL. And so they're kind of conjoined problems that we need to deal with in order to make this work for the district. But I'm absolutely willing to take on how we can provide some help to these urban school districts that have the kind of most compact surface area, get their kids to school safely every day.
I would just like to ask if there's ever been looked at a transportation waiver like we have our free and reduced lunch. It seems it's our children that don't have reliable transportation from their parents that are often in those same boats of needing to be free and reduced, as well as the low attendance. I mean, we need them at school and we need to get them there any way we can. And the state is already great about being able to do, I know it's a federal waiver that gives us the dollars for that, but there has to be something with transportation that can be done, especially it's not specific to Leavenworth, but definitely rural, lower income like we have. We're not fully low income, but the majority of our students that have transportation issues are.
And you're my neighbor. You live a few
Yes.
blocks from me.
And
so
I believe we go to Anthony, not
Yeah.
David Brewer,
Okay,
because
yeah,
we're on this
thank
side
you,
of 7th
thank you.
Street.
So,
But
yeah,
yes,
but still, that's a haul.
it
Okay,
is
yeah,
very
so,
much.
Thank you for correcting me there. So that's a great point. But you touched on the other issue, which is this is tied to the attendance issue. We
Yes,
talked about
very
it, Dr.
much.
Adams, when we were at Warren last week. We've got an issue here in the district with attendance, and so they're definitely connected. When mom has to go to work and has to be there too early to drop the kids off at school at 7:30, that's just not feasible. So I'll take it on.
I would just like to say to your point, but a transportation waiver, like a reduced lunch type of thing, I don't know if that's the way to go, because then you're going to have some people within that radius that qualify, some people who don't. I think you got to kind of stick with the distance. However, I would think in a district like ours, because there's crazy formulas that are complicated, you could tweak the formula so a district like ours may fall outside of the, if the state says 2.5 miles, however, if your district is like ours, where we're very compact and small, but almost everybody is outside that radius, I would think that would be the way to go.
Appreciate this. Those are good thoughts, good perspectives. It's kind of stuff that we talk about up there too. I think a density formula, I think is what we're kind of talking about. Density of population might be a way to pull into the formula. When do we actually reduce the radius? Obviously, when we have a higher density and a smaller radius, the price goes up faster versus a lower density that has the reduced radius. I think, and to your point, the waiver probably, I do believe that somebody who's in an at-risk situation, like I don't know what that means in terms of what the definition is, but somebody who has some kind of a risk in terms of coming out of their house and going to school should be taken care of. I mean, if they are in a dangerous situation somehow, that seems to be a priority. It should be a priority for all of us to make sure that kid has a safe route to school. Beyond that, it is a little hard to pick and choose to say 2.5 miles is good enough for our kids, but not for you guys up in Pleasant Ridge.
Yep.
So it gets a little bit dicey when we start doing that, especially in a legislature that has a lot of rural folks. So you have to get agreement that they're taking care of their kids as well. So, but that's a really great point. That a density probably seems like a pretty good idea in terms of funding for this.
Well, we addressed this situation before. You may remember, how would you like to have your kid cross 4th and Limit to go to Anthony School? So we took it out of Hyde to haul the kids from Woodland Village over to Anthony. That was the main thing. And the bad thing about that we were sending 2 buses at one time, weren't we, Amy? And then, but people weren't using it. And it got down to 1, and it was even tough to get a full bus with 1. So, I mean, I can see going out to do different things, but if the parents aren't going to get involved in it, I mean, that's what I've said all along with a lot of our situations, the parents and the parenting, that we've got to get them educated as well.
So this isn't, this is more of a city issue, but some of these children that do have to walk these distances within our city, there's no sidewalks in some of those sections at all. And they are forced, whether it's a quarter of a mile, an eighth of a mile, whatever it is, they're forced to walk in the middle of the street. You've plowed the street, but it's only pretty narrow with the plow. So they're trying to hump along onto ice and snow, risking falls, breaks, everything else. So this is worst case scenario of hazards, but I watch it every time it's winter. I can literally go 2 blocks and watch it happening to kids slipping and falling and not having safe, stable areas to even walk on. So we can't be the only city that has that problem. And I know the city's going to say, well, we don't have the funding to do that sidewalk here because it's more important to do this sidewalk there. But, it still needs to be brought to the attention, even to that level as well.
I'm super glad we're having this conversation about busing because I think pretty much every year I've been on the board, I've heard from several parents ongoingly about it, which we've talked about it here over and over, and we haven't quite figured it out yet. So I wonder sometimes if the bus companies, are kind of going by those state rules and not necessarily making sure to try to service everyone to the best of their ability. But I would love to see if maybe that's just a perception some families have. I would love to have the bus company come and discuss it with us as well. So.
Well, like a lot of things, the bus companies, they're short of drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they've got plenty of buses. They just don't have the drivers or the monitors. So,
One of the ways we addressed the bus driver situation, just so you know, we had a big workers' comp bill that went through, and I like it, maybe some don't, but in particular, they can now get what's it called?
Women's comp.
I don't know when they. Jesus. Sorry. They can get some unemployment during the summer now when they're not working. It was something that the bus drivers had been pushing for 8 years. I don't know if you're aware of that, but because it is some of seasonal work and they are forced to go off the job during the summer, they are now have an incentive that helps you guys out. In terms
you
of
say
time.
that's in the works?
It's already happened. It's already happened.
You did it.
We just passed it
Oh.
happened.
in June. So it'll
That's
be
effective
kicking in
when?
next year.
2025?
What's that?
2025,
Yes,
that's,
sir.
Perhaps when the state helps people get these CDL licenses to be able to do this, that as part of the incentive bonus, should they decide to turn around 2 months later and want to go work someplace else for 4 times as much, they have to return all funds that were spent to pay to get that license, kind of the way we do our retention bonus here.
So they're currently, as far as I know, and I may be wrong about this, but I'm not tracking any state program for it. So if a municipality is gonna, and here, I think Atchison does the busing here. So that company pays for that CDL. And I know that some companies, they do that. Like, hey, we will pay for you to go everything that you need to do to go get CDL, and you agree to work for X number of months. But I think what I was trying to get at is you're increasing the demand signal, right? Right now, they hang on to them about that amount of period of time, but now you're going to increase the number of people that, they're looking for. They're probably at capacity right now, or at the max people that are applying. So it's going to raise wages, raise costs. It's kind of a spiral. So I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer to the problem, but while we're doing this, we have to consider that as soon as we do it, it's going to increase the cost of busing. That's what I was trying to very poorly communicate.
while you're speaking of that, one other concern I have, these busing companies aren't necessarily huge busing companies. So we decrease the mileage, that's going to increase the number of buses that are required to transport the children, which these buses, any of us that have been to national conference know are not cheap by any means. And if you're wanting to do EV versus diesel, you're looking at $1 million for a bus. So, I mean, it's just, is the bus company itself going to be able to absorb the cost of buying the additional buses that it would take to transport that many additional children? Because the mileage rates got reduced. That's kind of like the Debbie Downer of it, of looking in finance. There's another incredible cost that comes to that.
That's 15 minutes on the topic.
Thank you, Mrs. Price.
How about Kid Dash?
What I think I heard is we got 2 new prospective bus drivers, so we'll get you guys in line for our CDL program. All right. Hey, we're going to shift gears. No? Okay. We're going to zoom out now to the broader context of the Kansas School Finance Formula, known as the Kansas School Equity Enhancement Act. I believe I have the sunset correct. I'm looking for Mrs. Maddox to confirm. We have 2.5 school years left. And so I believe the school funding task force will convene here shortly, maybe as early as January. And so wanted to talk about the broader concepts of our next school finance formula, challenges that you all see, and maybe things that are specific to Leavenworth that would be important considerations as we roll into that next formula.
So over my 4 years serving you as your state representative, I'm proud to have voted to fully fund our schools every year. This year we did, I think, $75 million for special education on top of that as part of the compromise with the governor. I'm a little frustrated with this issue because it always ends up like a mailer issue and a push card issue every election season. And, you support this, you support that. Every year, there's all kinds of talk about we're going to do all these different schemes for private education and all this, and we end up doing the exact same bill every year where we just fully fund education and nothing changes. I think that there's some campaigning on this issue and some fear mongering on this issue. At the end of the day, we all want our schools fully funded. We all want our kids to get a world-class education, whether their parents are millionaires, their parents are barely scraping by. Our kids deserve a world-class education, no matter what their zip code is, no matter how much their parents make. And so, the legislature has very little flexibility on how much they fund because we had the Gannon decision out of the Supreme Court. We're sort of told how much we're going to spend each year, and I don't really hear a lot of grousing from my colleagues in the legislature. That's what we're going to spend. That's what we spend. And so I'm here to listen. So if there are specific line items or if there are specific things that we can do better in the legislature, I would just say that while there's a lot of posturing and electioneering on this issue, at the end of the day, we end up voting the same bill that we vote every year to increase the funding on education.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I got to say a couple of things. I got to mention, I'm a product of Leavenworth High, and this weekend I had the distinct honor of being inducted in the first Academic Hall of Fame. Right? It sounds like I'm bragging, maybe a little bit. Sorry if I am. Sorry if it sounds bad. But what I'll tell you is that the Hall of Fame has always been sports, celebrating our military, celebrating our fine arts, that we have some great tradition. And then we brought in 11 who are still living into the academic. And I think that showcases we have a 150-year history here of very talented individuals. One of those was a Nobel Prize winner. And I think, when I went on to MIT, and what I learned there is that sometimes I'm not the smartest in many, 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 many things, as I met people that were super smart from all over the world. But what I did learn is that a lot of us all who are not at MIT, who are here in Kansas, who are here in this district, we all have different intelligences and we learn differently. And we all have something that's inspiring in the way we do it. And it could be as small as this thing, as big as this other thing, but it's different. And if there's one thing, if I think about our formula that I would like us to aspire to, is we have to learn to start. I mean, we have to learn to adapt. Of course, we know how to adapt, but we do need to evolve. And I think that if we can evolve to something that's a little bit even more individualized in terms of our individualized learning plans and these types of things, I would be very, very happy to see that. Because I saw what people can do when they have the resources and they have the ability to do those things. So if I saw something in a formula that could inspire that, I would love to work towards that. And I see that in one of my other districts in Piper. They're held up as a model of how the individual plan works. They have this I call it academy approach. And each individual is they're exposed to things that'll help them in their work life, in their overall life. Not, it's all the basics. We have the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also these academies help support, and there's a private kind of support for that. And wouldn't it be great if we could take that model and allow each kid to achieve their potential in that little bit of time? I would like to see that if we had a formula redesign, start thinking about some of that. It is hard because there is, as Ms. Overby mentioned, there's a lot of complications in details. This last year, there was an effort by one of my colleagues to take out the at-risk funding portion of that, which really would have affected Leavenworth District, USD 453. And that would have been, hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million out of our budget here by changing that one piece. So I mentioned it before. My colleague here has mentioned it. It is frustrating to see so much focus on this rhetoric issue. And, private funding could be private school funding from our public school coffers, could be around the corner, depending on what happens. But when it's not, we should focus on making a better formula for all our kids. Start thinking a little bit more about how do we help these kids individually achieve their thing, their special passion in life, their special ability. Some of that might be rolled into that special education piece. We need to do better when it comes to 2027 and see is the current formula working for us. There's going to be a lot of people say it's not. There'll be a lot of studies that'll show differing capabilities across the state about where we rank. There'll be a lot of people that will throw stones. What we need also is people who come up with solutions, I think. And I'm aspiring to be one of those folks, going through this once before back in 2016. I know that's a long answer, but I just think that we need to continue to look for what's better, try to maintain what we can, to the representative's point, but what can we add to this to make it better, that gets rid of some of these arbitrary discussions about how much we should be doing for special education funding, and maybe roll that into some individualized plan that emphasizes some of these academies or some kind of other piece that we can bring to the table. So that's kind of my perspective right now. Just kind of relating that to the group here. I'd love to have your feedback maybe after the meeting if we want to meet later on and you have ideas about that. So there you go.
You spurred one other thing. Something that I did, I think it was 2022, something that had been happening in Kansas, and we were only one of two states that were doing it, was for our military connected kids that are in our schools, they get a federal, the school gets federal money for them. And the state was not giving the school districts a certain portion of that money, and in essence, clawing back some of that federal money. And I was able to work with the chair of the K through 12 committee to get that ended. Also work with Joan Perry Wiggins, who's the chair of the governor's military advisory council. But that right now, that happens every year in the school budget. That is not enshrined in Kansas statute. Every year when we do the budget, we have to renew that. And so keeping an eye on that, making sure that that remains the case, and ultimately getting it into statute so it just ends the practice, I think is someplace where we need to focus to make sure that Leavenworth School District, Pleasant Ridge, and also USD 207 are getting that money for those kids to kind of compensate them for the additional challenges of having military connected kids in our schools.
The representative is absolutely correct. I worked on the Senate side on the same bill, and it seems small to those who don't know much about it, but having that money do that actually enhances our score, if you will, and the Department of Defense when it comes to, not that we're facing a BRAC, which is when they take bases away and put them in other states. But when they look at when those kinds of things start happening to reduce or remove or change the bases, we want to be best positioned here in Leavenworth to attract any kind of new federal employees, schools, other things. And this thing that was done was one of the check marks against us, unique to Kansas. That and then the licensure piece really upped our score with the Department of Defense in terms of how we rank.
I appreciate the comments as far as if I understood what you were saying with individualized education. I think it's important for each student. I think it can be critical for some to even stay involved with school or feel like they have a place that their education is important. So.
Any others?
That's 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Price. And we have 2 topics left. So we're going to shift now to the last 2 that are coupled together.
This should take 30 seconds.
All right, perfect. So the first is related to the revenue neutral rate and new truth in taxation concepts that came about, I believe, 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, for municipalities, USDs included, and some of the nuances specific to that and the new process that's required for that, and just the concept around that idea and the implications for our school district, as well as the implications for you from the state level. So I want to talk through revenue neutral rate.
So when I was running to serve you the first time in 2020, when I ran for reelection, and now I ran on bringing more accountability to our property tax system. And my frustration, it's one of the things that got me in the race the first time. One of my frustrations is I picked up the newspaper and the first week, the story was valuations go up by 15%. And then the next story, and I'm picking on the county government because they were the ones that were at the top story above the fold. It said in big bold letters, county commissioners vote to keep mill levy flat. And there was like this rah story about how they were keeping the mill levy flat. I'm like, well, that means all our property taxes are going to go up 15% to the county. That's not something to celebrate. You know, all I did was mow the lawn for a year. I feel like I should not mow the lawn. Maybe my valuation wouldn't go up as much, but every year it goes up 15%. And so I campaigned on that, and I found a lot of like-minded individuals. And so what Truth in Taxation does is it arms our constituents, not our constituents, because we all work for the same people. It arms them with an understanding of how much each local government, whether it's schools, city, or the county, want to raise the property taxes, and tells them when that agency is going to meet, when that government's going to meet, so that they can make their voice heard. And it has had an impact across the county on lowering or at least decreasing the amount of increase of our property taxes. I know that this frequently creates friction between me and y'all, and I will tell you for free that if all the local governments were raising our property taxes with the rate of inflation, you would probably never hear anything from me, because I understand that, you know, you're paying wages and the wages are going up, and you're paying for food and all the things that you have to do in order to keep the school running, and it goes up, and the same as our bills go up at home, your bills go up here in the school. And so if it was going up at the rate of inflation, you'd never hear anything from me. But when it goes up at 5 times the rate of inflation, which is what it's done over the last decade, that's unsustainable for people, and it's driving people out of Leavenworth. And so the things that I hear from folks when I'm out on doorsteps and I'm talking to them about it are 2 things specific to the school. First is, if the enrollment's going down, why are the budgets going up? And if, you know, the budgets are going up, but the standardized test achievement scores are remaining static and low compared to the surrounding schools. And I know there's a lot of factors for that, but that's what I hear from the constituents. And so that's why I supported truth in taxation. And that's why I think it's a great mechanism. It is not the whole answer. And I hope we're going to have a discussion about what else we can do about property taxes, but that's kind of where I stand on truth in taxation. And I think, like I said, that it's worked, and it at least gives our constituents a voice in how much they're paying to stay in their homes.
So when it comes to revenue, when I first started talking about this, I really believe in budget neutral. You know, there was a time in our state where our revenues and our costs were not equalized. We were not budget neutral. We absolutely needed to be, because we were borrowing from roads, not paying our schools, all these types of things, because we were not bringing in as much as we were spending, and we were having to cut back. And a lot of people didn't know how to do that. When the revenue neutral, just to be clear to those listening, revenue neutral, we know is if I have $100, we receive $100 this year. If we want to next year have our budget, it has to stay at $100, and the year after that stays at $100. And to the representative's point, we know that inflation happens, sometimes high, sometimes very low, but it does happen no matter what. And so $100 doesn't buy as much next year, and it really doesn't buy as much the year after that, and it absolutely doesn't buy as much the third year, depending on the rate of inflation. I think that, at first we put this in place, we got rid of some other laws that were kind of holding back local governments, and that was a good thing. But I think that this revenue neutral truth in taxation does need modification. It does serve a purpose. It does inform folks. It almost hyper focuses folks on the property tax. We in the state don't have a similar law on us. That's not fair to the local governments. We don't have one for sales tax and how much we're paying for that. I don't know how one would do that, but we don't have that. But it hyper focuses people's attention on this one piece. And unfortunately, the school board doesn't really have, besides the state funding, doesn't really have many other mechanisms, as do others, to raise that kind of fund. So it does provide a mechanism. Without it, we do have the potential to have runaway spending at local government without having a lot of visibility, because property tax is so confusing to our constituents. There are a lot of taxing entities. They add up, and it's easy to point the fingers to other folks without understanding. You get a lot of wild accusations that aren't true, and you get some that are very true. I think, though, that if we could put in place something that accounts for, I was talking to a man from Texas the other day, and they've had this for well over, I think, 2 decades, if not longer. And he said it was overall net good for the state. But they include a 3.5% increase every year, so that there's not as much pressure. It's like hit the rate with some notion. Now, 3.5 sounded kind of high to me, but a rate of inflation would at least account for the cost of doing business. People are not going to be able to get raises if we keep it exactly the same year after year. We're going to have buildings crumbling and people doing GoFundMes to fund those buildings. It doesn't make a lot of sense when we're doing this. So I do think that it does do some function. It does cost us a little bit of money to do this particular program the way we've designed it. But I do think if we want to continue it, we really should fix it with some kind of notion of increase it to a level that, accounts for inflation. It isn't binding. It just requires another vote. It is a redundant vote because everybody already had the idea of a public hearing. It does publicize the idea that you can get engaged, though. So it's not that I've warmed up to the idea that it's probably going to stick around, and I think we all should, because it doesn't seem like a lot of folks want to remove it. But if we do continue it, I think that we need to fix it so that it works for everybody and doesn't necessarily overly penalize a board who's trying to keep up with inflation and take care of physical facilities and take care of a labor population of teachers that do require raises. So, I think we both have done a couple of things on property tax. We can talk about that if you want. I don't know if this is the kind of forum you want to go into what we've done there. I know. I didn't know if we really need to go there. We are at the end of an hour.
Time.
almost.
So, very quickly, there's this perception, and it's even here in the topic, it says revenue neutral rate. The idea of truth in taxation is not that you have to stay at the revenue neutral rate. The idea of truth in taxation is that you hold a hearing and discuss, why you feel you need to exceed it. And again, I agree. And I would not be opposed if we did like revenue neutral went up every year with the CPI or something like that. I wouldn't be opposed to that if it made people more comfortable with the concept. And like I said, you would never hear a word from me if every year property taxes went up at the rate of inflation. Actually, you would hear a word from me. It'd be me shouting yippee from my roof at my house. The other thing I'd say is that I fully endorse the idea of us having truth in taxation at the state level. We tried to cut the mill levy 3 times this year and weren't able to get it through the governor. I think that there are some issues that we need to work through kind of across branches of our state government on how we can also moderate the property taxes at the state level. So I agree, let's do truth in taxation and revenue neutral at the state level as well.
Anything on that topic before I close this out? All right, you've already kind of segued there, but let's zoom out now to the broader concept of property tax relief. We, again, are one of the major taxing entities for anybody holding property in Kansas, and we recognize that. We also recognize that we rely heavily upon property taxes to help fund schools. But in the context of the conversation related to property tax relief and the need for investigating those issues, understanding the implications for us, what are ideas, concepts, maybe even win-win solutions that are out there?
Well, I hate to do it, but you mentioned the governor. You mentioned a bill that was passed. From my perspective, the hesitation was on our Senate and House leadership who wouldn't raise the property tax because they wanted to penalize some of those folks that were not getting along with the income tax going down. That's way down in the weeds, though. I'm glad that we were both able to vote towards lowering our property tax, as well as some of the other taxes we have out there, and eliminating the retirement, the Social Security tax out there, totally eliminating that in the state of Kansas. One of the things that I worked on over the last couple of years was exactly that. If we think about the broader issue of property tax and why does it feel so painful right now? For years, I would say, a lot of folks didn't feel it as painfully as they are now. We are in a growing district. Our economy is starting to pick up in a big way, especially regionally. And that means that we're experiencing higher and higher assessed values. And it's just a fact. It's a painful fact, but it's a fact. One of the bills that I was able to push through in the Senate, well, with support, obviously, from everyone who was working towards this, but I'd written a bill up to cap for residentials the assessed value from going up more than 5%. So that means that every year I've experienced double-digit growth for the last 3 years in terms of my assessed values. And, the absolute value of the tax there might not be that much, but to see double-digit growth on that and realize it's just a pass-through and that it reflects into the tax, it's frustrating. And if we could cap that, eventually the bill that got built up after that, I think it was 1611. And it was one that capped it at 4%, unfortunately applied across all farm and business entities, which caused a lot of other groups to come in and say, are we really good with that? But the beauty of that would be is the assessed value would only go up by 4% a year. Then we would have at least stability in our property tax statements. Even whatever your mill levies are, it would give us a feeling of what we were going to have to pay and keep it to a reasonable amount. And I talked to the governor about that, and she said, Jeff, what about all the locals? I said, the locals can adjust their mill levies however they need to. But the people would see that and they'd understand what's going on and which entities needed more money. But I think a 4% growth across the board is probably enough typically to fund most ongoing needs. I do think that when we look at on a separate topic on property tax, one of the things that the schools have is a bonding authority with a vote. The state caps how much we're willing to actually let you guys borrow, how much we're willing to support that. We could do more, but there's a feeling inside of some of my colleagues that without this kind of cap, that you guys are going to go crazy and build lots of buildings. But what that would do is if we had a little bit more state support on that, we might be able to help you with that property tax piece. On the state level, we do have a challenge with how much we can affect property tax. I mean, our portion, 20 mil for schools right now. We had some options to potentially lower that down to 18 or 19. We also we doubled the exemption for people on that portion. It's not as big as obviously your portion. I mean, we're proud to have done it. We could have gone further, and we might be able to go further next year. But what's really at stake is what about that bigger notion of the assessed values and how that fits in, and how do we maybe help local governments? There's an idea. It's almost too touchy to bring up, but it's been discussed of allowing a 1% locality income tax so that you or the county or the city has some aspect of income tax as your third stool of taxation, therefore potentially reducing the amount of property or sales tax that's needed inside of that district. It's a mixed bag. It could help Wyandotte County, it could help Leavenworth County, because there are a lot of folks that work in this district that don't pay for the infrastructure. So there's some ideas out there.
So I've also been fighting for the cap on property valuations, and the challenge is, as the senator alluded to, somebody thought it was a great idea to write property valuations into our state constitution. So the only way to fix it is to do a constitutional amendment, which raises the threshold to 2/3, or I think it would probably already be done. And there's some issues, that especially the ranchers and the farmers feel like it's going to shift the burden to them. So we got to work through it with them, but I'm committed to trying to get that done next year. I think that's the ultimate solution to this problem, is just cap the valuations. In a lot of ways, it takes the burden off of the local taxing entities, because, hey, that's how much it went up. And if we need more money, we vote for more money, but that's how much more we're getting each year. And 4% is about what the valuations went up this year in Leavenworth, which I was relieved to hear after years of double-digit valuation increases. Something else that I worked on that I'll talk about briefly is property tax relief for disabled veterans. Through the process of doing it, it also got extended to seniors 65 or older. And I had a lot of interaction with Leavenworth County to a rebate, so that all the local governments will still get all their money, and then that taxpayer will file with the state, and the state will give them a rebate for whatever percentage was exempted from their property taxes. And the reason I talk about that, because you're hearing me say that, well, it's going to have zero impact on our property taxes for most people. We separate 3,000 veterans from Kansas every year between Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, Fort Riley, and McConnell Air Force Base. 3,000 young people, and they've got spouses. A lot of them have kids. And right now, when they separate from here, the vast majority of them, I was just out of Fort Riley a couple of weeks ago, talked to the transition assistance people there. They said maybe 10% stay. The rest of them go to Texas and Florida because they have this benefit that we don't have. Meanwhile, the state of Kansas has 80,000 unfilled jobs, and we're sending 3,000 people a year, not including their families. Many of them have degrees, many of them have advanced degrees. They're still working age, and we're sending them to other states. Whether we realize it or not, we're in a competition to keep those folks. And in Leavenworth, out of 630 cities in the state of Kansas, we're in the bottom 13 for population growth. We have negative population growth. So if you want to know why we don't have a grocery in north part of Leavenworth, Do you want to know why Cushing packed up and left? It's because the people with the money to leave are leaving, and and the people who are left, they are in the lower end of the economic scale, and the money is leaving. And so we need to hang on to those people. And I think that in addition to the workforce, it's rooftops, right? Because if you have more people who want to live here, it's going to cause developers to build more houses for them to live in. And then that spreads the burden of property taxes across more people. I really believe over time that could have a huge positive impact on Leavenworth. And frankly, it's one of the things I went to Topeka to do, because I think it will really transform our city and our county.
I'll just add one last thing here is on that bill, I think might as well take the forum here. My last pass over that bill, it was bundled with some other stuff that wasn't going to pass. I ended up passing on that bill. And right here now, I want to make sure you know why I did that. What I heard on the floor is Senator Tyson say, and the locals will pay for it. And I thought it had gone back to the way it was originally and not as a rebate. So I felt very bad about that was a misperception. Heard it wrong. I asked around, and then we had to vote. I wanted to support this thing, but I couldn't, knowing that it was going to go back to those locals without us rebating that.
And in fairness to you, it was packed. So we were at the end of the session, and it's, if you want a dog to take a pill, you wrap it in cheese. And the cheese was this great bill for disabled veteran senior tax relief. And there were some things in there that I didn't like either. I had an amendment to bring it back to the floor during the special session. And the speaker and the tax chair came to me and said, hey, you can go up there and you can put that on, and we'll all vote for it. And then we'll have to take it to committee and we'll have to take it back off, because we have an agreement with the governor for what we're going to be able to do in the special session. But they promised me that in the next session, if I'm back there, it's going to be the #1 bill up front. Hopefully we can get it through with none of the nonsense in it. We can get this done for Leavenworth.
Dr. Adams, I was wondering, I think that brings us to the end of our time.
That is the end.
But this bipartisan stuff is what my dreams are made of. I think that we should be doing a lot more of this. I think this is exactly what our community misses, is a lot of these conversations with the different parts from both sides of the aisle sitting down and talking through the issues that all of us have to deal with every day. And so I don't know if the board is interested, but I think it would be great to get a picture with the 2 legislators that did take their time to come. And so that's just my 2 cents. But I also want to thank Dr. Adams for making this happen.
My pleasure. I'm sure Mr. Potter can probably oblige us on that picture. Is that right?
He's already like that.
Now, though we're at the end of our time for part of this, as we say, does that exclude us being able to ask a couple of questions based on what this portion was just discussed?
Sure. I don't know if you want to close it out here and then we'll take the picture. Yep.
All right. So everything on this list except possibly the teacher licensure requires finances, which means taxes. And we've heard a little bit of 1% here or 4% here. And that our property taxes fund basically most of our education funds. Now, what is the ratio of the lottery and the gambling in Kansas? Wasn't that supposed to be a chunk that was supposed to have been when they passed to bring all that here to help fund education?
My understanding, and this is with all due respect, I think that was a Missouri thing, and it was communicated. I think that was never part of the lottery situation here.
Yes, it was.
I've been told that.
Go back and look in the 1970s.
Okay, I stand corrected, because my understanding is it does fund some other programs, but my understanding is it doesn't really fund education now.
What does it fund?
There's a list. We can get that for you.
Okay. Well, it's just interesting because I've been here 22 years and I do remember it being said.
So I've only been in the legislature 4 years. And I've seen several cases where the tail ends up wagging the dog in Topeka, where an industry is so big and powerful that they kind of give us what they want us to do and they tell us go do it. And I'm very frustrated with that. I got a lot of grief. I voted against the sports gambling bill. I wanted it to go under the lottery because just when you look at, well, first of all, I didn't want to do it at all. And I've got a personal history, a family member who struggled with gambling addiction. And so I probably wouldn't have voted for it anyways. But if Kansas was going to do it, I would have liked it to have gone under the lottery, because what you see in states where sports gambling is under the lottery is the state ends up getting a bunch more money. And when it's under the casinos, the state ends up getting very little. And we were told 10%, but the bill that they sent us, we get very, very little of that money, because they get to deduct all those free bets. When you hear online, hey, we're going to give you $250 for your bet. Well, they deduct that from what they win when they're calculating how much we get in taxes. And so I would, I vaguely remember when we were having all the conversations about lotteries, and I remember them saying, yeah, this is going to fund our schools, and we're not seeing the money. And so I think we should take a look at it. I really do. And I think we kind of get sold a bill of goods on some of these things.
There's literally a fund that it goes to veterans. It's a formula that breaks it all apart into different categories. They did it that way to prevent future legislators from just taking the money into the general fund. So there's been some decisions about how that gets funded. Some of it goes to, oddly enough, gambling kind of counseling. Some of it goes towards addiction programs. Some of it goes to some very specialized things, for sure. But it is very specifically laid out. That can change by statute. As far as the sports gambling piece, I did vote for that. A lot of constituents who wanted that. I was very frustrated with one piece of it that I felt made it bad, and that was the fund that was meant to recruit a sports team here. Until I worked with the speaker, who let me know that that was an actual reality. And when I realized that was a reality and that we might have the opportunity to have the Chiefs here and there's a bigger thing at work, I realized this is something that I can support. So I was hoping, I love the idea of having the Chiefs over in Kansas for a lot of different reasons. That's a whole nother discussion though.
Okay, so then where there's been discussions on and off over the years, and I'm not saying I'm pro or con on it, I'm aware of the conversations. The legalization of marijuana, and I am a big believer of whatever does happen, baby steps are always the way to go. Starting off with medicinal marijuana, which there would still be a tax revenue based on that. Do you think as a legislator that you all could come to some kind of consensus that is where you could actually help pay for some of your additional mental health care positions within the school districts, or help fund the school districts themselves?
We have a $3 billion surplus. The problem is not enough money.
Okay.
The problem is what we're doing with the money. I'm of the mind that you give it back to people, but whatever we're going to do with it, the problem is not that we don't have the money to do these things that you're talking about.
Basically, it lines with just whatever the pet projects are, or the bigger dogs up in the
Sitting there right now.
So we could continue going down a lot of different questions and alleys, but let's go ahead and talk about this. There is a $3 billion, if you think about the rainy day fund of a $1.75 billion and a $1 billion one-time usage type piece of this. And that money, the rainy day fund is there just in case we're not sure what the economy is going to do over the next 4 to 8 years. So the rainy day fund is there. That is an area that could shrink and expand for sure and fund as we look at the 5-year projections. There is going to be some money I anticipate with the revenues continuing to come in at least at consistent for an opportunity, but these things do cost money. I'm a supporter of expanding medical marijuana, if not further. It could be used to do a lot of things. It could be used to help reduce property taxes like it's done in both Missouri as well as in Colorado. I don't really think we should debate the issue today, but I do think that, just so you know, I am a supporter uniquely in Senate District 5 for that particular thing.
Thank you.
Hey, I do want to let you guys get home to give your dogs some treats. More seriously, thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate what you do. Appreciate your service to Kansas. Let's take a picture and get you on home, all right? Thanks, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Where are we going, Mr.
Like we did the board picture before.
Are you wanting to stay sitting?
You have to order me to stand. Oh,
Oh.
Let's see. So I need Mr. Pittman to get here, right? All right. 1, 2, 3, couple. Thank you.
all righty then.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Representative, thanks for
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming. Okay. Might need a
Thank you so
bio
much.
break.
I'm ready.
Well, I think that Danielle's looking this way. I think.
Thank you, sir.
Should still have those hands.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna recess for 5
Headed,
minutes.
headed to the restroom now.
Then we'll,
It's a cootie shot.
we're gonna recess for 5 minutes. So we'll be back in 7:35. Okay, we're back in session. Where are we? Off track. Oh, we got a new, I think this is the new one? We're at 6, right? I think we're at 6. Chartwell's update. Mr. Chartwell here? Oh, there he is. Got a question for him.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I just want to take some time to share some information on behalf of Child Nutrition Department. First of all, I'd like to start with celebrating our team. This is your kitchen managers for each school, and just wanted to celebrate them because they do a great job. We talk about short staff, all the challenges that we go through, but they day in and day out they come and make things happen for their kids. So wanted to acknowledge that. And because of the amount of kids that we are serving, I actually added more management team in each school and added some managers in Warren, adding an assistant manager in high school very soon as well. So some good things going on. So a lot of promotions going on. So we have built a great culture within this 1 year, and hopefully we continue doing that. One of my main focus coming to this new year was building a relationship with the school admins and the students directly. So I spent some time with each principal. We're still working on a couple more principals to meet with. The goal was to make sure to understand their expectation, their vision for their students, and expectation from the kitchen staff, and want to see if my vision aligns with them. So there was a lot of positive, a lot of constructive. I went back to drawing board, restructured my menu design and service based on their expectation. So far, everything is going great. It'll be an ongoing relationship with the principal, meeting them every quarter to make sure I'm following up with them with their vision. At the same time, we are created a student panel in each school where I get to sit down with the students, understand what they're looking for, not just food, just the whole experience in the cafeteria. And some changes have been executed. Students have been noticing it. They went back to their principal, thanking them that they got time to directly sit with us and explaining what they're looking for. So these are some of the comments from the students. After the conversation, they are enjoying a lot of varieties that we are providing in the cafeteria. In high school, I added the frozen yogurt. I think last year, based on the comments or the survey that students gave, they're looking for the smoothie or ice cream. So we took that action, and we are getting some great feedbacks. A lot of fresh scratch cooking. In middle school, I was very surprised that students are noticing those fresh scratch cooking. And we have done some new recipes in each schools too. A couple of days ago, we are very fortunate to partner with a foundation to execute a catering for the Hall of Fame event. The event went very, very well. We were able to execute a service and food that kind of stayed at par of the expectation of the event. Menu is always our number one focus. Compared to last year, we have increased the varieties, new recipes. we are continuing training our team how to execute the new recipes. So as I said, there's a lot of fresh scratch cooking. So it consists of a lot of trainings as well. So this is just a snapshot of the new recipes that we provided. And again, the varieties is what we are focusing on, making sure we are giving them new items for the food. One new program that we initiated this semester was the Freezy Fridays. Every Friday, we want to provide something frozen for the kids. So right now, we start with slushies. So it's something cool. The students are looking forward to it every Friday. And again, the frozen yogurt in high school, we are kind of bragging about it now. A snapshot of meal counts just August and September. Breakfast, we provided 31,000 plus, breakfast and lunch 69,000 plus. And on the side, you'll see a daily average. Every day, we kind of serve 999 breakfast, and for lunch, 2,184. These are some upcoming events. So you'll see the dates next to it. We have Discovery Kitchen Mood Boost. One thing I'm excited about in high school, we're going to host a cook-off, culinary cook-off between students. And I'm still working on the logistics. Hopefully in December, when I'm able to present, I can give you, we'll get more pictures and information on it. And November 1st, we'll have a student survey coming up. So this is all I have for you guys. I'm very excited to continue this relationship with the school district and with the students. So far, this semester, everything mostly has been positive. There's still some constructive I've heard from students, but it just gives me, keeps me on my toes. Work on making sure things get better for them. So, do you guys have any questions?
How is staffing going? Are you able to keep the same people? Are you having turnover?
So we have a little bit of turnover, not as much as last year. Like I said, this past 1 year, my focus was on building that culture. So we still short staffed, but not as bad as last year.
I got just a comment about something that I went down to Turner and watched a football game a couple weeks ago in Opa. Are you familiar with Opa?
I'm familiar.
They run the concession stand for the school district, and it runs real smooth. I just wanted to be an opportunity for you guys to take on, because our concession program is terrible. Sorry. I mean,
It's volunteer based. It's volunteer based. Let's give them some kudos.
look,
for
I
being
know
out
all
there.
about, I ran it for a few years, okay? I know all about it's volunteer based.
Well, many
but
of
that
us
doesn't-
sitting here have volunteered at that, so I wouldn't be criticizing
Pardon
them
me?
too much. Many of us have sat here and volunteered. in
Well, I haven't
concessions.
seen you out there at the football field.
It did say it had to be recently, and I don't always have to participate in football. There's
Well,
other sports.
okay, well, anyway, may I finish? This is my opinion, okay? And a lot of people's opinion that will go out to the game when you stand in line for 40 minutes to get a hot dog. But anyway, is that something that you guys do?
We do concession, something I can take back. But with volunteer, what I can offer is we can offer consultant and suggestions and anything. We can step in and help with some kind of suggestions to the concession if it's a volunteer base. But answer to your question, yes, we do offer concession as well.
Well, I just think we need to look at that as an option, because I don't know, Mr. Vanek, can you enlighten me? Because it used to be that the clubs, they wanted money, they had to work concession night. And of course, everybody wanted to work football because that's where most of the money's made. The rest of it's chicken feed, really. And there's supposed to be X amount of parents and students working the concession. That's the way it was running when I was in charge of it. But it's a mess out there. I mean, I don't care who they are. They're just not able to handle it. If you don't agree with that, you've been out there. You've seen it.
So it is our PTA group that does that.
Yeah.
And, why a lot of that's probably seen on, if it wasn't what maybe you're used to in your experience with this, lack of support, lack of other people helping out. We have, about to say, probably 4 people that show up realistically to every single one of our activities, whether it be soccer, football, basketball, volleyball, even dance on Saturday night to help out. And we cannot get any more parents to come help out on that concession stand. So it's very taxing on the 4 of them. I have talked to them because they show spent a lot of hours up there trying to do all
Well, what was wrong with the program that used to, the program they used to have was about, okay, the ROTC wants to earn some money. So their parents of the ROTC kids and the kids go out and run a concession stand. You'd have 10 or 12 people working concessions.
Mr. President,
Now,
can we table this until Mr. Vanek's time and let Johnny finish up with his chart?
I thought he said it was done.
I just didn't know if you have any other questions if I step away.
You do concessions. I think that was our only
That's a
concern
yes.
currently that I heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Johnny, thank you.
Keep up the good work, Johnny. Okay. So much for that.
Now we
I
can talk to Mr. Vanek about concessions.
So for what it's worth, I'm willing to explore the conversation with Chartwells. I'm also willing to explore the conversation with our high school administration. But Mr. Vanek was asked to present on academics tonight. So I just wanted to offer that contextual background for the presentation.
just wanted to ask that those 4 people, if that's the correct statistic of those people that are involved, are a part of that conversation. And like Mr. Vanek stated, the fundraising that comes from that, the things that it supports, whether it's project graduation or whatever those groups do with those funds, that we take that into consideration when we're having that discussion. Thank you. And thank you to those people that volunteer.
All right, thank you. Well, good evening, Board of Education. Dr. Adams, thank you all for having me here this evening. Yes, I am here to present most of y'all academic-related data, but before we get there, I want to talk about some celebrations. And this is always challenging because there's so many. And I know when I get through this laundry list, I'm going to go, yep, I probably should have mentioned that one, or yep, I forgot that one as well. So there's a lot of great things. Obviously, we recognize one of those tonight with our Kansas Teacher of the Year. This is not an opportunity that very many schools out there get to achieve ever. We've actually gotten to do this twice now in just over a decade. So Jeff Baxter, I believe it was 2014, was recognized as Kansas Teacher of the Year.
Yep.
And now Liz Anstein joins that group. So we're very proud of her and very proud of all of our staff because we feel like we have one of the best staffs out there in the state of Kansas. We also had one of our math teachers, Miss Sandra Law. She was nominated and received an Outstanding Math Teacher Award from Pittsburgh State University here just about 2 weeks ago. So proud of her and the work that she does in that math department. We just recognized Miss Jenny Wooten. She was chosen and selected as the secondary Teacher of the Year nominee for our district. Last year, we were voted by the Leavenworth Times and the best of the best as the best high school in the area. As Mr. Pittman alluded to a little bit ago, we had an academic hall of fame and inaugural class Saturday afternoon. That was it's been a long time coming, and it's been a lot of planning over the last year. I've got a couple more pictures in the slideshow on that, but it was a very, very good event, very well attended. I think we had over 100 people attend that on Saturday afternoon. Miss Mia Bass, second-year teacher for us, is our secondary nominee for the Kansas Horizons Award, and this is an award for second-year teachers. So after they've completed 1 year of work and entered their second year, she's done a great job. She's somebody who is an alma mater. She graduated from Leavenworth High School. She's worked with the system. She came back to be a paraeducator after earning a degree, and after a couple years of being a paraeducator, decided she loved it so much she wanted to figure out what it would take to get her teaching credential. She's done that, and now is doing a great job in the classroom for us as well. Homecoming week obviously was big for us last week. I know many of you were there Friday for the parade, and maybe some of you for the game Friday night, but a lot of different activities. Obviously a dance Saturday night as well to kind of cap off a lot of great things for homecoming week. As part of that, the homecoming reunions. We had a lot of reunions and an all-class reunion tailgate event that has grown in size over the last 3 years. And every year just kind of grows a little more. This last Friday night, I don't know how many total number that we had, but it was bigger than I've ever seen it before, which is really cool to see a lot of us alumni all gathering back together, no matter what year we graduated, and kind of sharing some experiences from what we remember about Leavenworth High School. Building Culture Awards. You see the two things there that you've probably seen before. They are not new this year. When I started over as principal a few years ago, one of my goals was try to figure out how can we celebrate our staff? How can we try to award people and recognize people that are kind of going above and beyond and doing some great things for kids. So on the right-hand side of that table there is that little Pioneer Pete statue. Some people call him Creepy Pete. But you can see he starts to become decorated through the course of the year. Every week we recognize a staff member for either covering classes when we're short subs, for stepping up to serve on another committee, for just doing various things that go above and beyond what the normal expectations are. So we recognize them. And it's kind of become a nice little fun thing for staff that they then go add something unique to them, to that doll. So it becomes very decorated by we get to the end of May. It's pretty fun to see. The one on the left of that table is the Cultural Award. Started that a couple of years ago. I think this is the one that staff probably like the most. We present that at staff meetings, and that one travels from staff member to staff member. But the staff member that receives it is the one who then delivers it at the next staff meeting. So it's not an administrative chosen thing. It's staff to staff where they go out and see their colleagues in action. They go see people in other departments and figure out within the building who they believe is rising to the top. It is titled Culture First because it was a cultural award for me that stemmed a couple of years ago. And I kind of thought, we're the first city, we're the first school. Why shouldn't it be Culture First? So that's why it's stamped with Culture First on that award. But we'd like to do those things and celebrate with our staff. Before I get to the Academic Hall of Fame, there was one more that I forgot and neglected on here. Yesterday, we were also privy to the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. We had a Leavenworth High School graduate, actually a classmate of mine, Mr. Melvin Lister, was inducted yesterday into the Kansas Sports Hall of Fame. So another great honor for us as a school and a community to kind of sit back and have yet one more great name joining the ranks. He's actually on our Hall of Fame for athletics. He was inducted to that years ago as well. But Saturday afternoon, we had this Hall of Fame induction. Like Mr. Pittman said, we had 10 people that were there, honored 14 people in that inaugural Academic Hall of Fame. Academics is definitely one of those things that we stand for. It's one of the things we pride ourselves on. So why would we not have an Academic Hall of Fame? So for the last year, the foundations, we partnered together, had a nice committee trying to select, and it was a tough selection process to try to narrow down to 14 because there are a lot of great graduates that submitted names. So the selection committee had a very challenging time narrowing that down. But hats off here to Katie Edwards. She was the orchestrator behind all this stuff, put all these events together, planned a lot of events for this group, and it was a very, very successful afternoon Saturday. And I think every one of those members were very appreciative of being inducted. Our admin team at the high school has not changed from last year to this year. Mr. Mann still works with students A through E, Mr. Olson, F through L in activities, Mr. Kuntz, M through R in athletics, Mrs. Cole, S through Z, and then Katie Edwards, public relations. If you ask me right now, what do you feel about Leavenworth High School? I feel like it's better this year than it was last year at the same time. I don't know how really to articulate that, but it's a more positive feel in the hallways and in our environment. Some of that, I think, helps in stability. So having a stable admin team that didn't change, I think helps for our staff because our staff also knows who to go to and who to question when they have those questions. I think that helps a little bit. It takes everybody, but it does help me a lot to have stability in my administrative team and not changing those faces or names as well. A couple of years ago when I took over, it was about mid-year, I came up with this 3A, so it shouldn't be new to you all in seeing this, but this is still our focus, Leavenworth High School: attendance, attitude, and academics. That is what we focus on every single day. So I'm going to talk a little more about the academics here in the next few slides. But I want to hand you all something that kind of is encapsulated in these next few slides, but that way you have it in front of you as well. It is a little smaller to see on here. It's probably better on the screen, but
Thank you.
that way you have it in front of you as well if you'd like to look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So the first slide here is our CAP data. So what is CAP? It's the Kansas Assessment Program. So our state assessments. Every spring we'll take state assessments in 3 areas. That is language arts, mathematics, and science. All right, so language arts and mathematics test at the 10th grade level, science in the 11th grade level. For the 3rd year in a row, our language arts team has met or exceeded the state average. I know it's one of the things that Mr. Proctor talked about a little bit ago is about the building data and about district data out there. I wish he was still here to kind of see this because I'm very proud of my teams for doing this 3 years in a row now. So pretty significant stuff for me. We talk about data across the board, across different school districts to compare things. I put my staffs up against anybody. They do a great job of leading our kids. They don't talk the test. They don't teach the test. They teach, and our kids perform. The next slide are our math scores. Our math scores last year, for the last couple of years, we've been behind the state average in math. So we did a lot of hard work in PLCs and had a lot of tough conversations and dove through a lot of data last year in our PLCs. And despite having a couple of shortages in our math department, not being able to staff fully, they still found a way to meet the state average. My hat goes out to them. They work deliberately a lot of hours trying to figure out what is the best way to get to kids, what is the best way to teach that content so kids will understand it. They've done a great job. That showed up when that score was released. Finally, our science team. I believe for our science team, this is 3 years in a row again that our science team has actually exceeded the state average. So that's at the junior level, grade 11. All 3 categories of state assessments, we've met or exceeded the high school level. So that is something that I'm truly proud of with my staff. They are top notch. And when I say my staff, we talk about it every year. It takes them all. We don't just teach reading and language arts classes. We don't just teach math and math classes. My staff is dedicated across the board to do everything they can, no matter what content they're teaching, to try to improve fluency, to try to improve mathematics in their classrooms and finding ways to teach those things. One of the other measures that I'm super proud of, and this is not on your sheet in front of you, but is our ACT data. So if you look at another measurement here, and looking at our ACT data, so on the left-hand side, I know it's probably fairly challenging to see up there, but on the left-hand side, you're looking at the 22-23 school year data. On the right-hand side, you're seeing the 23-24 school year data. There's a lot of different things that are going on in there, all right? The blue bar and those bar graphs are its overall data. The red bars are the non-contract data, and the yellow bar is the state contract data. Let me explain what those differences might mean to you, okay? So the overall is just putting all of those yellows and reds together for an overall score. The difference between the state contract and the non-state contract is a few years ago, the state of Kansas took it upon themselves to fund the ACT for every junior. So every single junior in the spring semester has an opportunity, if they would like to take the ACT for free at no cost at all to them. We do that in the school. We've set up an entire testing schedule. It's very complex to orchestrate that exam during a school day while freshmen, sophomores, and seniors are running around the schools in their classes and maintain a nice testing environment for all those juniors taking it.
When's that scheduled?
This year, I'm not sure what the date. It's usually either late February or early March. So it's somewhere kind of right in that spring semester, usually right before spring break, somewhere right in there. The state usually gives us kind of a window of somewhere within this week, you have to find the day where you want to administer that. And then we try to figure out with that week, which day is going to work best for us. But there are obviously differences between the non-contract and state contract. A little different buy-in when you're paying for your own exam and then showing up on a Saturday at St. Mary's or showing up on a Saturday at our school or another school to take that versus taking it at school, on school time. So that's why you see probably a lot of discrepancies there. The thing I want to highlight here is that our overall composite score went up almost 1 full point. That's a huge gain in 1 year. A lot of schools celebrate, gaining like 0.2 or 0.3. They gained almost a full point. They went from 19.7 to 20.5. Now, I know that's not a full point, but pretty close to. That's actually a huge gain in one academic school year. So if you look at all the other bars, they break down by math, by science, reading, every different subgroup there of that exam. And if you look through every single one of those, you'll see increases in virtually every category from the 22-23 year to the 23-24 school year. Once again, that goes back to how hard my staff works every single day in their classrooms. It's another metric that's used here to show the growth in the last couple of years in our academic data with our kids. So I'm very proud of that as well. That leads us to the 3 E's. Once again, I'm not new. You've probably seen this before as well. We focused on the 3 A's because we hope that by the time our seniors walk across the stage, receive their diploma, they fall into one of those 3 E categories, and that's to be employed, enlisted, or enrolled in some post-secondary institution. That's our goal for all of our kids. How are we doing so far this year? Well, here's kind of where we're at currently. We have had 4 of our 5th-year seniors graduate. We've got a couple more that we're hoping to push through and get completed. But we've had 4. 1 actually finished in summer school, and then 3 finished early to mid-September and completed that requirement. We've got 57 of our seniors right now that are slated to graduate at semester. We've got 38 of those seniors that are right now on early release for career experiences. So what does that look like? Maybe they come just for 3 or 4 class periods a day and then go do some job internship or some other type of placement in the afternoon, or vice versa. Maybe they go to that placement in the morning and then show up in the afternoon for classes.
We have 62 students enrolled in PCC, which is Pioneer Career Center. So there's a lot of different programs over in that Pioneer Career Center. We've got a culinary program. There's HVAC, construction management, plumbing, electrical, cybersecurity. I know I'm probably missing one, but there are a lot of trades programs over there. We've got 62 of our kids that come to school 3 or 4 hours of our day and then go over there and enroll in one of those programs to seek certification by the time they graduate as well. We have a huge increase in community internships. We've got up to 21 students now this year. Last year, I think we only had 4 or 5. We hired a CTE coordinator, so thank you to you board members who were all in favor of that and helped us push that through. Ms. Gila is doing a phenomenal job. When we met her a few weeks ago, she's doing a phenomenal job of trying to increase the number of internships and partnerships that we have to try to get our kids exposed out into community positions. So doing a great job there and still seeking to expand that number even further than where it is now. What's new this year? Well, we did determine we needed some new things this year, try to improve where we were from a year ago. Cell phone policy, there's one of them. I'm sure many of you may have heard of that cell phone policy. I honestly thought this would get a lot more negative feedback than it got from our student body, but our student body has actually responded very well to this. So students at the high school can use those personal electronic devices in the hallway and at lunch. So essentially in the hallway on their passing period and at lunchtime, that phone is theirs. During instructional time, when that bell rings for class, that phone should be out of sight, out of mind. It should not be a distractor to what they're doing. We do have a little envelope policy. If a kid, for some reason, gets that phone out in a non-taxing, non-aggressive way, we just ask that student, put the phone away in the envelope, please, so it's not a problem, so we can continue with teaching. Our kids have been phenomenal with this. It really surprised me. I thought they'd push back a little more, but they've been great with it. They've been just fine getting those phones stored away and put away. But I think that's been a big change in that building culture this year. Kind of when I said earlier, it was a more positive feel. I think that's been a big part of it. And so I'm really anxious to see what our academic results are this year because our kids seem to be much more dialed in and focused in classroom settings. Another thing we talked about, my admin team, myself, actually my staff was a part of this as well. We kind of sat down from last year to this year and talked about some things that we believe we can improve on as a school. How can we improve our culture at Leavenworth High School? So we talked about a lot of things, and then we kind of zeroed into the things that we believe we have much more controls on. All right, these aren't district decisions or maybe other schools or anything in the community. These are things that within our school we believe we can have controls on and try to improve. So these are our 4 pillars. We talk about them weekly. We've got them posted in hallways. We've got them posted in classrooms. At the top, just simply be on time. You want to talk about an employment skill, basic employment skills 101, right? You want to keep a job, be on time every day. Show up, be on time. Use appropriate language. We talk all the time at the high school. I've had some class groups, and we've had a lot of conversations about appropriate language. There's a difference between the language you use out on the street with your peers and the language you're going to use in our instructional hallways and our instructional classrooms. So let's make sure we're using appropriate language when we're in that building. Which kind of cornerstones right to the next one of being respectful. We've got 1,240 plus students in the building, over 100 staff members. You're not always going to agree with everybody. Okay, we've got people from other countries, we've got people from different states with military move-ins and move-outs. You're not always going to agree with everybody and their ideas and maybe their background experiences, but you're going to have to be respectful of them. Okay, we do not have to do that in a disrespectful way. And then finally, dress appropriately for the setting. When you talk about employment, you talk about dressing professionally. I tell kids all the time, if you see me at Walmart, you probably won't see me in a suit, right? But you dress appropriately for the setting that you're going to be in. All right, in a school setting, we expect certain things to meet our dress code expectation. We did change this year as a district. We researched this last year, so hats off to Dr. Adams, Dr. Varvel, Dr. Vettelberger. I know there are a lot of people involved in this. There was a committee that we talked about how can we improve with the attitudes, with the behaviors that we're seeing. So they met last year and tried to figure out what could we adopt to make a K through 12 type of a program to hopefully meet this need of behaviors. So we've gone to Safe and Civil Schools. Thank you to Mrs. Waters. We were talking a couple weeks ago, and she said, yep, we call it champing it out in my classroom. I was like, all right, I like that. I'm going to steal it. So we're champing it out at Leavenworth High School. In every classroom, I've got champ expectations in our hallways, in our cafeteria, in our restrooms. You see it all over the building. Our kids have responded well. So if you look at the 2 displays, so we're talking about referrals and we're talking about incidents. I'll display that. But we're talking about last year is in blue, this year is in red. So this is just the difference in those numbers from last year in blue, this year in red. I want to clarify a couple things. Had a great question, Mrs. Wells. I think. Thank you for reaching out. The difference in these is this: last year to this year is not last school year in blue. It's last school year up to this date when this was ran, which was just about a week ago. And in the red, it's this current school year up until this date a week ago. So it's comparing apples to apples in terms of timelines. All right. So that was a great question. I want to make sure I clarify that as well. Another thing to look at here is what is the difference between a referral and an incident? A lot of people have that question. So here's the difference. A referral is when a student behaves incorrectly in the classroom and a teacher sends a referral to the office for that student. Okay, that is a referral. When it becomes an incident is when that administrator sees that student and it's something that is suspendable. So if it is an ISS or an OSS type of discipline that's incurred, that's what differentiates. Okay, so if it's just a referral and the kid comes out and maybe they get a detention or a couple of detentions, that doesn't kick over to incident reporting. Those are more of the minor consequence things that don't go into incidents. So that's what is the difference between the referrals and the incidents. But as you can see in either one of those categories, big time decrease in data this year. At the very bottom, you'll see the actual percent changes. The referral change is a 44% decrease. The incident change is 61% decrease so far from last year to this year. It's made a huge change. I can't tell you, I wish I could tell you right now what's made the change. Is it cell phones? Is it the schedule? Is it the champing it out? I don't know, but collectively, we're seeing a very different building right now with the behaviors. That's a great thing. That tells me if we can get the attendance taken care of, our academic data should continue to just increase furthermore. Discipline is down. Kids start attending a little more. The cell phones aren't a distractor in classrooms. They should start achieving even more so than what they've done in the past, which is another thing I'm very optimistic about and looking forward as well. Which leads me to what opportunities do we have for improvement and sustained focus? Well, it spirals right back to the 3 A's. We're not perfect at it yet. It is our focus. I don't know that we'll ever be perfect at it, but it's something that we value and that we keep trying to talk with kids and how can we keep improving in those areas? How can we keep trying to see gains in student achievement data? And I think if we continue to focus on those things, we continue to try to improve those things, we'll continue to keep moving that needle forward. We may have some pitfalls along the way. There may be a year or two where maybe we go down, but then bounce back up. But I think those are the 3 areas that we need to continue to focus on and seek improvement in. With that, I conclude my presentation and open the floor up for questions if you all have them. Before I go, I do have a couple of upcoming events. Remember, for those of you, some of you are parents, so I hope to see you all Wednesday or Thursday at parent-teacher conferences. So don't forget about those and community members as well. Hope you're watching. Please come out. Let's see us. Let's make a big appearance either Wednesday night or Thursday for conferences. This Friday night is senior night. So it's our last home football game. So it's our senior night for our band, for our cheer, and for our football players. So please come out and support them. They put a lot of hours in outside of the school. They try to improve their craft. And then November 1 and 2, I'm looking forward to, we have our first production of the year. We're doing Adams Family Production. So looking forward to see how that rolls out on November 1 and or 2, depending on which night you might want to be available for that. So looking forward to those things. With that, I open the floor for any questions.
Mr. Vanek, I'm curious about attendance from last year, the first quarter to this quarter. How are we looking for? Other things are on down, so I'm just curious.
That yet. Quarter doesn't end until tomorrow's the last day of the quarter. My data guy's been out for a couple of weeks with an unexpected event in his life. So he just got back today, but looking forward to kind of seeing what that is doing data-wise. I know we're going to have probably more tardies this year, but I feel as though the attendance is hopefully moving in a positive direction as well.
Okay, thank you.
And the tardies this year, I feel like are more first hour, not necessarily during the day tardies, but it's the first hour.
Did you say you felt like you were going to have more?
I feel like we're having a little more volume of kids that are late to school. I don't know if that's transportation issues. I'm not sure what the reason is for that, but it feels as though we have a few more kids, not significantly, but it feels like we have more kids coming in a little bit late to first hour.
Do they have to list a reason or anything?
No.
And then I'm extremely excited about the cell phones. That's something I was excited that Dr. Adams was excited about. And so I'm glad to hear that seems to be helping, hopefully.
It feels like it is.
Okay.
It feels like it is. I know my teachers, we talked last week, had a department chair meeting. We were talking about what do we feel like has really kind of risen to the top. And they were pretty much overwhelmed. Like they felt the cell phones was probably the biggest thing that's helping kids focus in classrooms.
That
Or I
was
guess lack of
started,
cell phones, maybe.
that was started last year, but maybe not,
So last year,
consistently
the
or
cell phone
across
policy
the
was still
board?
up to teacher choice in classrooms. So teachers could allow them if they're working on writing a project or if they're working on an art project or something in classroom, they might permit them. But due to those indiscrepancies, I guess, if you will, we just said across the board, no cell phones this year in classrooms.
Thank you so much. I just want to say kudos. Kudos to the phone policy, kudos to the behavior reductions. I think they are all interrelated along with the schedule and each teacher having hands on the kids every day instead of that wild day on, day off type thing. I think having hands on kids every day, eyesight, just keeps you more informed on some of the issues that could be coming. Do we not still have the policy where it does not affect us that as long as they're late, if they're there within 30 minutes? I remember we had some kind of little policy thing that it didn't impact like the attendance count for revenue purposes. And it could have been something Dr. Rotha did because we were having some instances like at Lawson and places like that of trying to get kids from here to here to here, that as long as they were in that school building,
It's like
29 minutes or.
it's so many minutes at the beginning of the day and so many minutes at the end of the day.
Yes, so.
Not
We have
not at the
extended that
secondary.
time.
Okay.
Some.
Even more.
Yes, because it's not a funding thing, it's a chronic absenteeism thing.
Okay.
So in that, depending on when the student comes, what James or Mr. Manick was referring to is just tardies. Just counts as tardy, doesn't count as an absence.
Right.
Where previously, the way our previous policy was, if they came back at 31 minutes, that counted as an absence. Now we have extended that time because we saw patterns, and especially at Lawson, you're 100% correct.
Right.
Where we needed a little extra window. Same thing if they check out early for a doctor's appointment. If they do it at the end of the day, where before, if it was 31
It's not
minutes.
impactful.
Okay. So, yes. ma'am.
So that's still in play. So that is good. So I think what we would need to look at, that I would be interested seeing, just how deep into the tardy they are. Not the 30 minutes tardy. We understand there's still a flow with transportation, parents trying to get kids to multiple different schools. Maybe the one, how far did you extend it? Is it 45 minutes now?
No,
I mean,
it's as far as absences go, for the elementary schools, it goes almost till 10 o'clock.
okay.
For the high school and the middle school, you have what's considered a tardy, I'm late to class, and then you have a disciplined tardy, I'm just roaming around talking to my friends.
Okay.
So there's two different codes.
So I know there's 2-hour doctor's appointments and that's just keeping them from being listed as absence. And I understand that. I'm talking more at the ones that could be chronically tardy every day, be it transportation issues. I'd be interested to see those numbers if there's a way to capture those.
Sure, we can probably filter that down. After we get
Alright.
our first quarter data back, we can probably filter that down and figure that out.
All right.
Yeah, the
thank you.
code we're referring to the high school is called plus tardy. So we have our normal tardies if they're there within a certain time frame, but if they're like excessively late, but they do show up, we put a plus tardy in there.
Right.
So we
And
know they
and
did
then,
show up, they're not unverified, they're not absent. They
right.
just
And
showed up
with
excessively
that,
late.
maybe the correlation of how that could be affecting their grades
Very well could be.
or behavior. And maybe try and lead into that. And that might be something we could pinpoint to be able to help get some kind of management in there that may be able to smooth something over.
I can't disagree, there's probably a correlation.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Vanek, I had a question.
Yes,
On
ma'am.
the cell phones, when we do the envelopes, are we leaving them at the desk with the kids, or are we having them put them on the teacher's desk, or?
Nope, they stay at the desk with the child.
Okay.
So if it was you, I'd walk over, hand you an envelope and just say, Miss Wilson, could you please put your phone in that envelope, put it right on the corner of your desk for the rest of this hour.
Okay,
And at the end of the hour, it's yours. You hand the envelope back and you go to your next classroom.
all right, thank you.
And so can we talk for maybe just a moment, if you have some input on what would the negative effect be of like a student entering a classroom late to the teacher, and then the effect on the student's academics for?
Well, it depends on how late they come in the room,
Yeah.
right? If you're talking just a couple minutes late, they may have just missed maybe that just opener, that just maybe teaser into the lesson. So nothing probably necessarily too significant. into the actual direct instruction or the main content. But oftentimes that opener is that hook into the lesson. So they kind of come in if they're a couple minutes late and kind of miss that like teaser of like, I missed, the connecting piece of where we're going to go today. Certainly if they're 20, 30 minutes late, they're probably missing the majority of a lesson. In a 47-minute classroom, that's going to be pretty detrimental to their learning. They're going to have a lot of makeup or trying to come in maybe to an advisory to try to make up that instruction that's been lost.
Not trying to add extra work for anybody, but just seemingly if it seems to be a problem that's increasing, it would be nice to have data as to the reasoning potentially, so we could try to look at what barriers we're dealing with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have several questions. On slide 8, when we were talking about the CAP data for science, why is there a difference between the school and the district?
So the difference between the school and the district, not all students at Leavenworth High School attend Leavenworth High School.
Okay.
So on the science, we probably had a junior that was placed at Nettie.
Okay.
And so there's probably a difference in that data.
Okay.
The other two pieces with the sophomores, they were all at Leavenworth High School. We didn't have maybe one student over at the Nettie location.
Okay. And then just a note on the ACT data slide, we flip-flop colors there. Can we not do that in the future? For the state contract on the 22-23 year, it was red, and on the 23-24, it's yellow. So I was like, wait, why did that change? And it didn't. It was just a difference of that, if just a little tiny bit. And then I've noticed that the Pioneer Career Center enrollment is down again, but our internships are up. Are those related? I would hope not, but.
Could be related. Don't really know an answer to that right now. I'm definitely happy to look into that to try to figure out maybe those 21 kids that are doing internships are those kids that maybe are seniors that might have been in PCC as a junior last year and now decided to do an internship. I'll certainly look into that and see if I can find an answer for you.
And is each counselor still responsible to try to recruit for the Pioneer Career Center?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have like one specific counselor or teacher that's
We're going to have
doing
one
that?
counselor that's more of a liaison
Okay.
for the college. If there's any information that needs to be given back and forth, but all counselors are responsible for enrolling their own kids. We still have a unique way to pre-enroll kids every spring. Every counselor has a one-on-one face-to-face conversation with kids to try to figure out where they're going, what their plan of study might be, what the best maybe career path could be, and what that could look like academically for them.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. And then the last thing that I had was on the safe and civil schools on that slide. 14. Sorry. Let me just look at it again. Is there a way to capture the data? Like what we have here is fantastic, but I'd also like to know, in addition to this, how many repeat offenders, like out of the 304 referrals, 50 of them were for the same kid? Or is there a way to know how many participants earned those referrals instead of individual referrals? I think that might be helpful. And the same with the incidents.
I would probably say there is a way. I would defer a little bit to Dr. Varvel, but I'm sure there probably is a way to capture of those numbers.
In the future, I would really like to see that.
Yeah,
Each
that would
building,
be
not just
helpful.
with the high school.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Because we don't know how many students potentially we're dealing with.
Right.
Because I don't think
talking
it's
50 kids that created the number.
I don't
of
think it's
incidents or
304 of
100
our
kids.
students that are doing this. I think it's
Sure.
And I would just, thank you.
Nope. Thank you for that feedback. Anything?
I think you're done.
Thank you.
One thing that's not necessarily for you, it might be for Amy Jo, but this presentation, not Amy Jo specifically, but our HR team. So you had pointed out the fact about Mia earning that recognition. She's one of our graduates. You had mentioned that. We've got a lot of our graduates that are coming back. Is there any way that as our HR team, we can incentivize our students to come back and teach for us, like give them an extra little $500 bonus for coming back? Because I know a handful of our students that love our community and are glad to be back, and not only just like a recognition, maybe even like a little Leavenworth Teacher Hall of Fame. Our alumni came back and taught for us for however many years, because we've got you guys all over the place, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah, there's quite a few of us in the building that are
Yeah.
they're alumni.
Absolutely.
And I'm definitely proud of that as well.
Yep.
As I'm sure Miss Sloan is as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Vanek.
Okay, item A, strategic plan update. I guess Mrs. Sloan's gonna take care of this.
turn it so I can see. You guys know I'm kind of. All right, so student enrollment. I would love to stand here and tell you some positive news, but unfortunately, our enrollment continues to decline as it was projected in all of our studies. We had 3 separate studies in the last 15 years, and all of them projected that our enrollment would decline. So this is not, it should not be a surprise. So our enrollment, this is our pre-audit September 20th. And on that day, that snapshot of our enrollment, we are down 213 students in comparison to last year. All of our buildings are showing a decline of enrollment with the exception of the virtual school. And I do want to denote that the virtual school, while it's up by 2, by the end of the school year, that will probably be triple that number because we have 2 educators that assist our students that may become suspended. That are gen ed students that would be assigned to continue their education through the virtual school. So while the number is now 25, it will rise over the length of the school year.
I got a question for our lawyer. Robert, can we investigate, maybe call parents and ask them why they're leaving the district? Is that legal, illegal, you think? Or? Just to get an idea. So if somebody says, we have 50 people say it's the teaching or whatever, don't like the building, just maybe find out what the issue is.
Well, I think you'll find that our numbers are actually out of district, or the new term non-resident is actually very similar. While the numbers don't reflect that, is because you grandfathered in all of our non-residents last year. So our non-residents are actually up in comparison to the previous year. And I'll explain that here in a second.
Okay, carry on.
Yep. So here we have average class size. I want to remind the board gave us the authority. You set the ratio to teacher, and I'm pleased to show that our elementary, you'll only see 2 classrooms or 2 grades. David Brewer is at 19 for 2nd grade, and it was capped, or the capacity we set would be 18. And then, of course, over at Henry Leavenworth, we said 4th grade would be at 22, and it was actually at 23. So we hit the mark on this, and we believe that these numbers, thanks to you approving this, that we'll see better academic success because we've set our numbers lower. Elementary in-district transfer, we received 43 in-district transfers that we actually approved. These only occur in our elementary's grades 1st through 4th. So the only reason that we approve these is they have a sibling that would already be in the school. We're not going to ask families to go to 2 different schools if they're already on a in-district transfer. The other reasons that mainly we get requests is because of childcare. We approve those based off of if we have room. We did have to deny some based off of capacity and where we were at in our buildings. And we try not to. We do our very best, but we want to make sure that we meet those. This is the enrollment for non-resident, what we used to call out-of-district residents. This is what you set back in April when we set the capacity. So after we took all of our enrollment from last year, we rolled every grade up. We kind of thought we knew who was coming back. And then we set our student to teacher ratio. And based off of that, we said we would have up to 160 open seats. Does that make sense? And this is exactly what you approved back in April. So there's no change to this. Please know that we took the applications. You approved the policy in December. And when you approved the policy, you grandfathered in all of your ones that had to apply every single year. They no longer have to apply. As long as they are in good standing, they will be our student until they graduate. So the 167 that were non-resident last year, they were automatically grandfathered in this year. Okay. And that's not included in these future slides. So keep that in mind. We accepted the applications through the month of June, and then we did not have to go through a true lottery per se. There were only a few that we just didn't have open seats. So then they were denied, but we were able to accept the majority of the non-resident
So you have 167 plus 33. If my math is correct, that's 200. If you look at the previous year, we were at 149. So we actually increased our non-resident.
Okay.
And that wasn't reflected. It was hard to, the way
It's
we
very
were
confusing.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to give you past history, and with the new board policy, it kind of muddies the water. So I want to make sure I'll pause and make sure everybody understands that. There is the definition of the non-resident. I think I've explained they're grandfathered in moving forward. Here, transfers for elementary non-resident. This board and previous boards have always asked, where are the students coming from? And so you can see in our elementary, we had 5 non-residents, and where they actually came from other districts surrounding our area. This is elementary. Next, we have our secondary. Again, we've already approved them. So 167 got to come back. So we actually had a total of 28 non-resident new. Now, this is a snapshot of today. There is the potential, we have move-ins and people will request. We have already made the decision per your direction that we would look at those, and if we have open seats, we would consider them. So the high school will continue. I will tell you from what I reported was 149. We actually gained 18 additional non-residents from last year when I reported at this time. That's why that 149 became 167. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then again, just as we reported previously, the non-resident students and where they actually came from by the different districts, both for the Warren campus as well as the high school. Our Pioneer Career Center, Mr. Vanek did a great job of telling you the number of students who are enrolled. I do want to make sure that you understand the number I'm showing here is 109 for the year. That will fluctuate a little bit because we will potentially increase second semester, and also does duplicate. So a student that is one of the 62 could be listed again for the spring semester. The question was asked, why is it down? I'll break it down here. Your enrollment by the actual programs. We did have 62 enrolled this semester. Just as we are having staffing, they also are having some staffing, and then the number of seats that were offered to our students declined as a result. We did have to turn away students who wanted to attend the Career Center, the Pioneer Career Center, unfortunately. And we'll continue to work in partnership with Kansas Community College to increase those numbers moving forward. But just like any other district or university or college, they're having staffing issues as well.
Does that decrease, is that also because of seniors that are graduating at this semester?
It could, or it could be some of that. We could have a few, absolutely, or they'll move on and go to maybe the main campus at Kansas Community College on the main campus. The graduates, or just they finished the program too, because some of our kids may start a program the second semester and then follow back up in a first semester. So there's a lot of factors for that. So we always like to tell you, and I know you know this, but our district is a very transient population. And so what you see here is the number of new students that have never previously been enrolled in our district and the number of students who are returning. And so that's the new to our district as well as the returning students. And then I have asked, this is a new slide. I've asked Beth kind of to share with you. I know a lot of you have questions and concerns regarding the budget and the impact. So Beth provided this slide for you.
Okay. So what you see is the estimated 25-26 general fund and supplemental general fund budgets using our 9/20/24 enrollment count and the current school finance formula. The 25-26 estimated general fund budget would be $28,978,000, and the supplemental estimated budget would be $9,592,000. So there is an operating budget shortfall of $1,838,000 in the general fund and $644,000 in the supplemental general fund, for a total operating budget shortfall of $2,483,239. So this is the decrease in revenue due to declining enrollment, as Mrs. Sloan has just shared with you. I also know that there are going to be operating expenses such as salaries and health insurance, property insurance, utilities, those other things similar that will more than likely increase as well. So therefore, the district administration has started reviewing, and we will continue to review expenditure budget items thoroughly so that funds within the operating budget may be reallocated as we start to plan for the 25-26 school year. So we have a lot of things coming at us.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a lengthy project. It's not going to be a quick solution project as we go through this. Okay?
It's a big puzzle and we're going to solve it with you. So we are very positive that we will come to a solution that will be beneficial to our employees and our staff and our students, because that's what we always do. So, questions?
And say more to come.
That's all we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are transportation. Didn't we already discuss transportation? Who got this? Amy, you got this?
I'll stand up here for a change. And I'm here to talk about transportation. This follows up from a conversation, I think, 2 or 3 months ago. So I'll let you buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. Is this thing on?
Yeah.
I think it's always a good reminder. How does this connect to our strategic plan? I would argue that this conversation is ripe and connects well with at least 2, arguably 3 of those. And I would commend you for raising this topic. I think sometimes too often in schools, we get focused on the wrong problems or problems that won't have an impact. I would argue this is something that would have a very deep impact with several of our families. So on the agenda tonight, I want to talk to you about just a general overview of our current status, talk about our current challenges and service gaps. You requested what I call the mileage band analysis, some of those financial implications that will connect to the previous agenda item. And then finally, what I believe are the options for current expansion. So just a little bit about our current context and situation that's important to understand. First of all, is that transportation is made available in the state of Kansas for anybody that resides 2.5 miles or more from their school of residence. The important moniker that I use frequently is flagpole to front porch, and that is by way of road, so not by way of the bird, but by way of the best route that a bus can take. Additionally, transportation is made available for anybody or any special education student, but the important caveat here is that the IEP dictates that that service is provided. Sorry for the small text, trying to get a lot of content on one slide here. So again, the funding that follows, what's really important and what's underlined there that will connect here later, is for whom transportation is being made available. And I'll explain the context for that here in a little bit. But again, GPS calculations are used for purposes of calculating that. Services then, upon request for when capacity is available for students that are inside of 2.5 miles. And we'll connect to that here in a little bit. Transportation very clearly is not provided for out-of-district students. So as you just saw, those students that are choosing to live in Lansing but come here do not qualify. And the other important caveat, and this is specifically for our elementary, is if you decide to transfer in district, you also waive your transportation privileges. So I may live in the Henry district. If I choose to send my students to Anthony, I waive my transportation rights in those instances, again, because of the complexities of the logistics there. So let's look at our current route situation. Every day, there are 23 buses that are somewhere on the road providing routes, as you will see there. Probably the big one that stands out to me is LHS. You might be wondering, why is it a little bit lower when it's our number 1, our largest attendance center? 2 caveats that I think are important to point out, one of which is the age of children that can drive, and the second of which is USD 207, busing those students on the fort down here. So we do have the ability for some of our students to not be transported. That is a nuance that's specific to this district. That would not be the situation in several other districts in Kansas. And then you see the elementary numbers are lower. 1, they are the smaller attendance area. And 2, generally speaking, the neighborhood elementary concept keeps kids closer to where they go to school. So our current capacity at 45 students per bus is just over 1,000. As you just saw, our enrollment this year is 3,300. So about capacity for 30% of our students is what we have as of today. So let's shift now to understanding the challenges of our current situation. The first of which is what I described as the unmet demand, and we're going to look at that here in a little bit. But those are the students that request but are then later denied transportation. And the issue here is that those seats must be held for qualifying students throughout the entire school year. And so the nuance that's important to understand here is those seats might be available last week on Friday when it was really hot in the morning, but tomorrow I was told we were in a freeze advisory. Suffice it to say, we are already expecting that we'll have more students riding the bus as a result of that inclement weather that begins to set in. We must then permanently hold those seats for those students that are qualified. We cannot fill them and then later unfill them. And so again, that is the complexities of our current situation.
Question regarding that specifically, just for wording purposes, maybe.
Sure.
Qualifying students, that's not saying that every single student that resides 2.5 miles away that does not require transportation is having a seat held for them. It's only the ones that have enrolled for bus transportation, whether or not they get on it.
Nope. So if you live 2.5 miles or more, you qualify throughout the entire year.
Regardless
So
of
there's a
you
seat on the
enrolling
bus
and
for you?
asking
There
for it
is a seat
regardless.
there. We are
Whether
required
you-
to hold that seat on the bus. Yep.
Whether you opt to take it or not.
You got it. Yep. Because back to, I don't know where the back button is, that really important sentence right there, it's underlined, for whom transportation is being made available. That's a really important question. So thank you for answering that.
And that's a state legislature thing?
Yep. That is directly in statute.
So they would have to change that verbiage for whom is enrolled or something
Yep.
in order to
That is accurate.
change what we have to.
So why didn't we bring that up while they were here?
We didn't have the slide to go over it.
I don't have an answer to that
refresh
question.
our
I'm sorry.
memory.
Okay.
We can
And chances
email.
are they won't know the
email them.
specifics of the language, so it's something that's probably better suited to hand them or email
Okay.
us or talk.
Plus, this is probably not really going to be happening, but I can even see the standpoint of where you've got a child that lives within that. They're holding a seat, but the kid is a teenage driver. So he's driving. So he's not using this seat, but could get involved in an accident, total the car, thereby now requiring the seat. We can't just keep picking and pulling, because if we do, then we've given that seat to somebody else, and then he's not getting his qualified seat.
Extenuating circumstances. but we
Right.
can't see around
Lots
the
of
corner.
extenuating circumstances, family dynamics could change, a divorce could change. There could be so many different things. That's why that seat is guaranteed to that student regardless.
Thank you for the question. Another important thing I think it's important to understand about our district, we're going to talk about size. I call us a micro-urban or micropolitan, but you put intentionally, I think, your elementaries into the corners of the district, which is great. You created neighborhood elementaries by theory. And then at the heart of the district is both the high school and the middle school. So 2/3 of your students are centralized into the district. And then your early learning center is, of course, at the north end. Meaning, in general terms, I'm painting this with a broad brush, the majority of your kindergartners will qualify every year because it's at the north end. The majority of your middle school and high school students will not qualify every year because it's at the centralized location. And then because you went with the neighborhood elementary concept, i.e. where I live determines where I go to school, the majority of those students will also not qualify. So I think that's just some important context. Again, I'm not being critical of any of the decisions that were made, but it's important for us to know how that relates to the general premise of this statute. And then finally, I think it's important to point out, I think we had this conversation earlier, so hopefully it resounds, but the bus capacity, so physical infrastructure as well as driver availability. And then I do have concerns personally about the road and street capacity. And that, of course, is for other people to answer. And then, of course, the financial implications. So several challenges there. All right, so let's look at what is our current demand as we have at least tracked it. The important caveat to this slide is if somebody didn't turn it in, we don't have a record of it. So I have reason to believe that our demand is actually higher than this right here. Okay, but I know, or I assume, let's put it that way. I assume we have families that didn't put it in, but would like to have the service app. So I have reason to believe our numbers would actually be higher. Those are broken down by the 4 bands respectively of half miles. So you'll see there the total is really not large in the grand scheme of things. But again, I think the context that's important is there may be students that or families that did not turn that in. All right, so let's look at the mileage band analysis. Some important caveats here. I cut it off at 1.0. So again, we're in half mile bands. We're using the 24-25 enrollment data and the home location data. Go back to Mrs. Sloan's slide. We have a 3A district that moves in and out of our 5A district every year. So suffice it to say, this slide is probably already old by tomorrow because new enrollments are occurring every single day in our district, right? And it is based upon, again, those GPS calculations for bus eligible roads. So again, a bus has to be able to get down that road to be able to determine the total distance, okay? All right, so again, here's a map of our district. I think most of us know, but just to orient, we go north to Metropolitan. We go south to essentially Muncie. There is that little carve out right around the Home Depot area. Obviously, the east is the river, and then I would argue it's about 25th Street on the western boundary. 17 square miles. Again, corners for the elementaries, and your two largest campuses are at the heart of the district. So what does it look like in mileage bands? 800 kids annually are outside of 2.5 miles. When you look at the next band, the next half mile band, you grab 547 students respectively. That is not a typo. It is, again, another 547. So in round numbers, every half mile is another 500 students. Again, I cut it off at 1.0, but as you can imagine, those three numbers plus that 800, the difference would be those inside of 1 mile. All right, so let's look at state statutes that are currently codified that have an effect here. The first of which I think is important to point out here is that your transportation wage has what I would describe as an arbitrary cap that is based upon the prior year expenditures. It is set at 110%. So if you spend $500,000, you would be limited next year, regardless of what you spent, to a 10% maximum increase on that. I want you to keep that in mind because as you ramp up potential expenditures, your state aid will be capped by that 110% mark. And then the second thing that is nuanced to special education in Kansas is what is known as the 80% reimbursement rule. So generally speaking, those qualifying expenses are reimbursed at an 80% rate. Again, that has to be qualified. That's the important part to take away here, okay? So let's look at how transportation aid is calculated. Again, it's based upon a density index that we talked about earlier. We're 17 square miles. This is last year, just to be clear, because we just turned in data this year and it's not yet posted to the website. 832 kids fell outside that 2.5 mile distance last year. That equated to a density cap of $550. So you will see last year, revenue that flowed to the district was $560K. So what does our 3-year average look like? We went back and looked at both revenue and expenditures, and you will see here a gradual increase until last year, what I would say was a marked increase in the total payments to Easton. And then, of course, what's honestly just a slight decrease over years for the transportation weighting. That, again, top section is for special ed, so your 3-year average is what I kind of use as a metric because you may have spikes in the data, of course. So generally speaking, you are over 300,000 that is being supplemented from the general fund to provide services currently. On the special education side, you'll see more flows from the state, thankfully, to that 80%. But again, the grand spend, about $250,000. So if I add those two numbers together, again, I'm looking at the 3-year average, you can say that you are spending over $500,000 from the general fund annually on transportation services. All right, so some considerations I think are important. One is the funding side, knowing full well that you're going to have a cap on it. But two is that budgetary implication. As you add service, as you lower the radius, for example, you will demand more fuel, more driver costs, and more of those expensive buses that Mrs. Murphy referenced earlier, okay? You also have some policy adjustments to consider, in my opinion, relative to, do we require students to get to certain stops, or will we continue to allow anybody, so to speak, as long as they qualify within that respective mileage band? So you've got important decisions to make on how that language is crafted. The state aid compliance that I referenced previously, and then the one that I'm grappling with, that I'm going to allude to here in just a second, is how do we truly get a grasp on the actual demand? So here Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Potter, part of the conference, parent-teacher conference survey, will be 3 questions, if I'm not mistaken, that are seeking to understand people's current demand for the service. I have in my mind that it's higher than that table I showed you earlier. I'd like to have some data that supports that instead of pure conjecture. So here's the options that I think exist, and how do I say it? Capture quickly of a pro and a con. So if you maintain the current status quo, obviously your expenditure level would simply be subject to the inflationary rate. Easton has already discussed about 4% is what we can expect from an inflationary standpoint. That again, I anticipate is for rising costs of fuel and driver costs. But I don't think it addresses what we're hearing as our true demand. I think this also connects to other things like attendance. I have in my mind that if you increase transportation, that would have a direct impact on attendance. I cannot offer you what that would be. It's purely conjecture, but I believe the two are related. Option 2 increases the eligibility. Again, the theory is more kids qualify as you lessen the mileage band, right? But increases your expenses and it demands more driver and infrastructure cost. I believe it begins to address the unmet demand. As I share with Jake, until you create a policy in which every kid qualifies, you'll have some kids, some families, depending on where you set that new line, that will continue to not have their services met. And then finally, option 3, that I know has probably been discussed a time or two in this district. I know it's been discussed in other districts as well. I believe it is at least relative to this conversation, is do we begin to investigate the adjustment of school start times? I know that this has implications, numerous implications, and I acknowledge that. And they have implications on our families, on the community, on workforce, et cetera. The list goes on. But Easton has confirmed that would allow our drivers to be able to double up. So if Karen drives bus 23, Karen is able to drive the elementary kids first, for example, the high school kids second. We are able to utilize the same driver in the same bus, but in a double up fashion.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. So you would create an offset, so to speak, with say your secondary schools from elementary. Secondary goes first, secondary goes second, it doesn't matter. The idea is that I'm only transporting half the district at a time. So I'm able to utilize the driver and the bus twice in the morning and then repeat the same process in the afternoon.
We have districts around us that are currently doing that.
So the one I can think of most recently, I believe, was Olathe, if I'm not mistaken. They would have shifted their secondary schools. I don't know what the offset was exactly, but the same concept. Shift one half of your district.
That's what my question was. What were the times basically?
Yep. And so again, this is not official. Please make that note. Generally speaking, you need at least 30 to 45 minutes to allow a route to complete before that bus is empty and ready to.
So one school would start at 8, one would start at 8:45 or something.
You got it. Yep, absolutely.
It's definitely gonna be more money.
I'm sorry?
It's definitely gonna be more
Well, I
money.
mean, you're still gonna have to pay the fuel costs and all of, you know, so all of these options are gonna increase costs.
Yep, I would say everything except for your status quo, right? What I like about the last option from an expenditure standpoint is you don't demand new drivers or new buses. You just have the increased fuel and the increased costs for the labor. Does that
You're
make sense?
just adapting the schedules.
Yep.
If I may,
You may.
granted, most people will say it was 100 years ago, but when I was in high school, we did this staggered schedules. So high school went to school, they started class at 7:35.
Okay.
7:35. The elementaries or the middle school started at 8.
8, yeah. So you created a 30-minute offset?
It had a 30-minute offset. The high school students, we got out at 2:30 because we were starting so early.
Yeah.
That gave us more time to get to our jobs or get to our sport practices and other things. So we were still maybe able to have some family dinners and things like that too.
Sure.
While the other students were getting off at 3:15. And it still kept the dynamics pretty much. The ones
Sure.
I hear kids do not like, teenagers do not like to get up early and function better to get to sleep in. I've read all that science too. But there were a lot of pros to this, especially when it got to working after school.
I think the district I came up in did the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like what is old is new again.
So the districts that are doing this are they like maybe more considering the elementary school level? Do they make adjustments to arrival time, or like is the school taking care of kids to make up for that, or do the parents have the kids potentially more than? Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. I'm going to paint this with a broad brush. Most of the time, the elementary goes first. And the reason for that is the workforce and the ability to have kids dropped off by what is typically the 8 o'clock start time.
So they weren't as much affected.
Yep. And so your point about research, typically what that says is that the older my brain is, i.e. as I enter into my adolescent years, I actually need more time to wake up versus less. So there's research out there that supports high school kids starting later, right? And the implication is if I drive, I'm 17 and I have my own means of transportation, that has less of an impact on a family that needs to get to work. That, of course, has all the other implications related to activities and athletics and all that other good stuff. But I at least felt like it was important to bring the potential solution to a head for you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that the end of your presentation?
That's the end of that amazing presentation. Yep.
That was a pretty amazing presentation.
Thank you.
How soon do you think we'll have all the information sort of analyzed from those parents?
I'll look to Mr. Potter for that question. So, how quickly can we have the analysis of the
I don't want
survey
to
data?
rush anything, but I'm just curious. I know it's going to take, you've got 2 days to get the inputs, but then 2 weeks. Okay.
Awesome.
Because I'd be curious to see what we get most.
Yeah.
The questions.
Yeah, I think one of the things that interests me the most is to see if it can help with their attendance at all, or even tardies, if that's the issue or not the issue.
Well, the next thing would be where the kids are waiting for the bus, because nobody's going to want to set a kid outside in the dark in the winter, 3 blocks from their house at 6:50 in the morning to get on the bus to make sure they're there by that school time. And I'm pretty sure that was one of the issues why the high schoolers went to school sooner.
Sure.
And this was Tennessee, and we're kind of like on the same line weather-wise.
Anything else about busing?
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We get to speak again.
I'll stay seated for this one.
Pardon me?
I'll stay seated for this one.
Carry on.
Thank you.
Item 10, superintendent goals.
So this circles back to the day of convocation. If you recall, we had a special board meeting at noon at the high school. Very robust conversation, and I appreciated how productive that was. I think there is value in our system and our patrons, and just generally speaking, everybody that is tied to this district, being made aware of the goals that you've established for me, where you've asked me to focus my time, because I know that it has residual effects upon our staff. My goals become our shared goals collectively, right? So this is what I believe I heard were the 4 primary goals. I then also identify what I believe were appropriate action steps to work towards achieving those goals. And hopefully you'll see a familiar trend. It is the X to Y by win format. Become a firm believer in that. That is, again, the work of Stephen Covey. So, and you'll see there, increase the district recruitment fill rates. So emphasis on filled positions from 85 to 90% by June of 2025. I'm not going to go through all the action steps. I know you all have read it already, but just want to emphasize again something that maybe sticks out. So for example, bullet point number 3 is to create a process for establishing a means to track the time to hire. I think it's important that we look at how long does it take from when a person applies to when they're in the position, and whether or not that time can be reduced. If it's at 4 weeks and we can reduce that to 3 weeks, that would have a positive implication on the system. Does that make sense? Moving along to goal number 2, which shifts to, I would say, a very frequent topic, which was to decrease disruptive classroom behaviors. Here, the office referrals and incidents by 10% by May of 2025. You saw earlier, some of the data preliminarily. That's almost quarter 1 data that is promising in that regard. So again, just highlighting one, I will show you the professional development on behavior management and looking to that 100% of staff by February 2025. I think that is so important. When I mean all staff, I'm talking our bus drivers, I'm talking food service, I am talking substitutes, right? It is more than just teachers in the classroom. And some of that work has already started, and I'm very thankful for those departments embracing that. Shifting to number 3 then, this shifts, I would say, to the academic side of the district. First of which was increasing our reading scores for our earliest learners. And so you'll see here the percentage of K2 students reading at or above benchmark. And the threshold there was 10% from the fall to the spring. So we're using the same cohort of students within the same academic year for that measurement. And the one I would, I guess, highlight here is to look at the launch of family literacy workshops and resources as early as the end of the fall semester. Again, I believe families can be engaged in this process. This is not just our work, it is collective work. And how can we arm our families and our parents to help support us in that initiative? And finally, the instructional non-negotiables, again, to create systems of cohesion. And I would just say, generally speaking, better and more clarified expectations across the board. So here you'll see the implementation of instructional non-negotiables across all sites, with 85% of the classrooms adhering to those standards by December of next year. And one important piece here was the monthly classroom observations starting in March of 2025. I can say I have started those already, but becoming more systematic and more, organized in that effort. I would stand for any questions.
Good.
Did I capture what I think I heard on August 7th?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your support.
And when it comes time for the evaluation in November, right? If you're gonna put not met on a bullet or you exceed, let's have a little dialogue on why you chose that, just for his sake, if nothing else, but also for the good of the public.
Well, we will have your part of it done before that, your support form, so to speak, right?
Support form will be completed shortly. Yes.
Okay.
I felt like it was important for you all to, I guess, bless again what I had here, right? And so that'll go into the super eval, and then we can put it in the Friday note again. Next steps for you.
I mean, 'cause a negative thing can be important to him. You know, and so if you might have 3 people have a negative thing with the same problem, and that tells him what he's got to do. But just to put not met and don't say anything about it, this doesn't make any sense to me at all. Or exceeds. Same thing for exceeds. Shouldn't be too hard to do. Okay, next. Number 11, executive session for matters affecting a student.
Mr. President, I move we go into executive session to discuss matters affecting a student pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, or KOMA, and that we return to open session in this room in 10 minutes at 9:07.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Price to go in executive session. Second, I didn't hear the second.
Mr.
Alyssa Murphy, all in favor?
Aye.
Look like 7. Okay. Take my glass over there, yes. So what you're gonna do?
I'll read it. And
Yeah.
We'll need a second.
Okay.
We'll need a second. So this will be like the motion.
Pardon me?
This will be the motion, and then that's the second. Someone has to second.
I got you.
All right. Ready?
Are we on time?
We are.
Carry on.
All right. Final action after an appeal hearing before a hearing officer in a student extended term suspension or expulsion action. Resolution 24/25-016. Whereas pursuant to a hearing under the provisions of KSA 72-6144 et sec, the hearing officer recommended that a student be suspended for an extended term of September 13th, 2024 through May 22nd, 2025. Be placed on administrative probation through the first quarter of the 2025-2026 school year. And whereas the student or the student's parents or legal guardians, if the student is under the age 18, timely appealed the decision of the hearing officer to the board. And whereas an appeal hearing before a hearing officer appointed by the board was held on Friday, October 11th, 2024. And whereas the hearing officer who heard the appeal submitted a written opinion containing findings of fact and conclusions in this matter and recommended the decision of the hearing officer be affirmed. Whereas the board has received no additional evidence in this matter, now therefore be it resolved that the findings and conclusion of the appellate hearing officer be adopted by the board and that the extended term suspension or expulsion of the student in this matter be affirmed.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, we had the resolution read and seconded by Mrs. Murphy, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
7-0.
And I'll remind all of the board members, please come sign this before you depart tonight.
Okay, thank you. And moving right along to no executive session, don't we?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, non-elected personnel.
Mr. President, I move we go into executive session to discuss non-elected personnel pursuant to the exception under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, or KOMA, in order to protect the privacy interests of the individuals to be discussed, and that we return to open session in this room in
6 minutes. Oh, 15.
I was told 15,
Well, he went, I saw that.
which will put us at 9:25. The board will invite Dr. Adams, Amy Sloan, and our board attorney to the meeting.
Second.
Okay.
We've got a motion to go into executive session for 15 minutes. Second by Mrs. Murphy. All in favor of that mess? 7-0.
You didn't
Let's
work as a
go.
ref very often, did you? That's totally 1-5. Nope.
Closing of the meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the staffing report as presented.
Second.
Got a motion to accept the 7th by Mrs. Wells, second by Mrs. Murphy. All in favor?
Aye.
7-0. Now we can close the meeting. Do I need to read these dates to anybody, or can you all read? I don't think we need to read.
The only thing that I wasn't tracking outside of the special meeting, it's here at the board office at 5:30.
On the 28th, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool.
So let's just go to board comments.
On
Huh?
unscheduled.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought-
it's okay. I know, I'll be good. The one person still watching online wants to hear me. Anyway, it's been a long time, so just want to say happy fall. We're back in school. Everything's going well. Congratulations, Dr. Adams, on your Superintendent of the Year finalist award. And I know it's been said many times, but Liz Anstein is a phenomenal teacher. She's a member of LNEA, and she's a dear friend of mine. So I wanted to say congrats to her again quickly. Thank you to Senator Pittman and Representative Proctor. I agree with Mrs. Reed. That is how governance should work. And it was awesome to see that, teamwork and et cetera. Chartwell, I know they've already left, but I can't say enough. Our kids love the food. The portion sizes are fantastic. The Chipotle chicken and buffalo wraps sell out every day. So it's awesome. Regarding the parent concerns, I just want the public to remember that many of the teachers and staff in this district have children in these buildings too. And so their safety is our utmost concern. And my child is at the middle school as well. So I think maybe there's room for improvement always, but we'll get there together. And I think everybody did the best that they could do in a pretty trying circumstance. I also wanted to let you know about HOCO last week. It went great. Thank you to the community. But we did have a new event at the high school with the homecoming dance. We had a sensory-free room. And that was largely due to two parents, Mr. and Mrs. Waugh, who are phenomenal supporters of ours. But it was the coolest thing to see the kids in the sensory-free room, coloring, playing basketball, playing card games. It was incredible. So that was super cool. It's a long conference week. We want to thank PTA for the lunches that they'll provide on Thursday. We hope the community comes out. And we'll see you in November. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to board comments. Ms. Reed, you want to start?
Well, it's been a full meeting. I feel like I've been here for days. I don't know why tonight, but there's a lot of things going through my mind. But I will reserve it to responding to the two speakers that started the meeting. First of all, I'm extremely appreciative whenever someone takes the time to come and speak to the board. It's usually very much outside of most people's comfort zone, and so I take those very seriously. I would say that, of course, I welcome one-on-one conversation. I would say that a lot of the things security-wise that the board does is done in executive session. A lot of the conversations we have, a lot of the staffing things, whether it be trying to add security staff. I remember one of the things that I did was try to bring Chief Kitchens in, and that was before Dr. Adams, I believe. So I would like to see if the board would be interested in doing that again. Now that Dr. Adams is here, we have a different superintendent, and just having that conversation again, inviting Chief Kitchens in and seeing if there's anything we can do better. And I would welcome, these parents to, let's have coffee with Kitchens and let's see what they expected from the police department that they didn't get. And then I do want us to reflect as a district, as a board, and make sure, they didn't like the form of communication. What can we do better? That they named some specific things, and so I hope we'll follow up with those and take those seriously. I know that it's not a one-off. I had my own concerns, but of course I'm going to handle those privately with our staff. So just because you don't see a school board member on the news or blasting something out in an email doesn't mean that it's not important, doesn't mean it's being ignored, doesn't mean that it's not the absolute thing that's most important to them. Anyone that's had very many conversations with me knows that safety was one of my main concerns when I ran for school board. It was one of the things I mainly addressed when I got on school board, and it's something that remains at the top of my list for the district to try to make sure that we're prepared in every situation and that our communication is excellent. So thank you to those parents that came and spoke, and thank you to everyone for participating in the meeting tonight.
Ms. Wilson?
I also just want to say thank you to those who came out and spoke with us, and just remember there's no school Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but come out, see your teachers, get involved, know what your kids are doing. So have a great week and love on those babies.
I just want to say a good meeting. It was good to see our legislators, a good transportation discussion, a lot of good information. Congratulations to Ms. Anstein, well deserved. This was the first year in many, many years that I missed all the homecoming parade celebration, missed the Central Plains Band Festival. Had a family member who did not consult USD 453's academic and events calendar and decided to get married over the weekend. So I was out of town. But thank you to everyone who came out. And remember, go speak to your child's teacher and enjoy the rest of the week.
Ms. Price?
You're gonna let me go at the end, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I have a couple things. First off, a big shout out to the Leavenworth Education Foundation and all of those folks who support them, because they did the recent Yay Parade for the Innovative Teacher Grants, and that is an absolutely wonderful process supporting our teachers with really great ideas to help our kiddos. Also for coordinating the inaugural Academic Hall of Fame and doing all of that, because it was a year-long process to get it all sorted out and all the nominations, and that was just a wonderful event. And in order for you to help them, Mark your calendars for the 25th of October. They're doing a meat raffle for the fall. If you haven't been to one, it is an absolute hoot. So please come sit with me. We'll have a great time. The parent-teacher conferences, they're important just for building relationships. If you don't know your teachers for your kids, you're missing out because that's someone that's with your kid, a third of their day. So go meet them. And this one's really important because that transportation question, I really want people to give us the information because if you don't give us the information, we will not make good decisions. So we need that information from everybody. Always the congrats out to all of our teachers who do such amazing things like Ms. Anstein and some of our new contestants, if you will, for the Teacher of the Year. I'm just thrilled that we have another just awesome teacher here in Leavenworth because, well, to me, they're all awesome. Thumbs up to the Raiders as they march on their way to their 5th national title. That's going to be good stuff. And for all my fellow board members, please come sign. I don't want to chase you down. And go Pioneers.
Mr. Murphy?
Okay, so I'm going to be echoing some of the things everyone's been saying. Congratulations to a safe and happy homecoming, parade, dance. Didn't see the game, so I don't know the score, so I don't want to touch on that if that's touchy. Congratulations to all the nominees for the Teacher of the Year. And again, congratulations to Ms. Einstein for that wonderful accomplishment. Congratulations to Dr. Adams on his nomination. I also want to congratulate all the inductees into the Hall of Fame. It's always good to be the first, but then that also means there's going to be so many great people that come from behind as they keep adding to this Hall of Fame every year. On a more smaller idea, congratulations to Mrs. Q at Henry. I heard you got the football. Way to go. Congratulations. I know you'll pass it down to somebody else. It was really exciting to some of your students to see that happen. And then I want to go ahead and thank all the teachers and the staff for everything that you all do for our students. I know there are many stressful times around. But at the same standpoint, I want to sit here, and as somebody who used to be a professional volunteer manager, I don't have the up-to-date figures, but an hourly wage, if you were to pay a volunteer, is anywhere from $27 to $33 an hour. And our parents, our students, and even our teachers and staff many times are volunteers. That means their worth just on what the government throws out is anywhere from $27 to $33 an hour that we don't have to pay somebody to go do those jobs and duties. And I want to let you know I'm very appreciative for every hot dog you serve or every kid you escort or every Raider family that sits there and puts a meal together for those families. Every parent that sits there and is a room parent that coordinates a party or any other multiple tasks that you may do within our school district. Thank you. Our district could not perform without you either. And have a safe, lovely rest of the week. Don't forget to talk to your kids' teachers.
Swills?
Keeping it short, echoing what everybody else has said, absolutely. Keeping to par, marching band season's almost finished. Friday is our last performance with the final football game of the season. Come out, support the band. Last week were our 2 band competitions. It's a lot of fun to be a part of that. All fall sports are coming to an end, so thank your coaches and parents that have supported these athletes and throughout the season, and look forward to the upcoming seasons ahead. And Adam's family, I cannot wait. That looks so cool. That's it.
Adams family?
Yeah, for the play for the
Any
next week.
alibis?
That
Oh.
was my alibi. Make sure you go see the Adams family. Our guys have been doing amazing stuff in their practices.
Yep.
It's awesome. Go see them. 1, 2, 3 November.
Well, this is no alibi. This meeting's adjourned.
Sign it.